Erica, if you can keep an eye on the attendees, if you can keep an eye on Dawn, raise your hand.
Oh, sure.
But I wouldn't know if she. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Welcome tonight, all people and mammals. We'll call to order the February 8, 2023 Select Board meeting to order. Announcements. Do you want me to do those? It's Libby, you're on. Yeah, the Select Board meeting is being audio, video recorded. Department of Public Works, April 29, 2022 Arbor Day Proclamation. We missed that last year, right, Erica? So we signed it tonight and we're proclamating it tonight, but there'll be another one coming next month, I think. Okay. Any Select Board announcements and comments to start? Brooke, I always look to you first. You usually have something.
So I have a couple of things. First of all, the NCTV is presenting their film Island Cup tonight at 7:30. So if we had a short meeting, people could go, but it'll be also on April 15th. So I wanted to share that. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly is yesterday, a large group of us met for better than half the day. And this was a PFAS summit, and the intention was it was an interdepartmental coordination session, and sewer, water, facilities, solid waste, landfill, town admin, FinCom, and the consultant CDM Smith presented a lot of their data and stuff on their research on PFAS. And really the purpose of it was to ensure that all of the town departments and that are involved that have impact from PFAS on their work are coordinating timelines, projects, and that they understand decision-making points like, the new landfill contract and what PFAS testing impacts on that. And so it was a really great experience to have all those folks together, really trying to coordinate and collaborate on addressing what is now become a major problem. And I also want to say that overall, the feedback that I get is that what we're doing with PFAS on Nantucket is way ahead of the curve on other communities, that we are doing more than virtually any community in terms of acknowledging, testing, researching and addressing, finding ways to address this issue. So I just want to share that with everyone.
Thank you, Brooke. Any other comments? Malcolm, Matt, Dawn? Okay. Follow-up comment from prior Select Board meetings. This is a public comment from February 1st regarding the Surfside Crossing 40B natural heritage and endangered species permit. Libby's going to, so Libby, I don't have my computer with me, so.
I'm on. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So last week, a question arose at the meeting about a state permit for the Surfside Crossing development, which was carbon copied to various town staff in August of 2022, and it allowed for an appeal by private parties. However, the appeal was not acted upon, and there seemed to be a lot of concern about that. I researched the matter to determine who in the town received the email and what, in fact, they had done with it. And I myself did not receive the email. A staff person in the town admin office, who was one of several carbon copied parties. That person was out of the office dealing with a close family member's sudden and unexpected death, and the email became lost in an extremely high volume of email upon her return. The other two staff members from different departments believed the email to be informational in nature and did not require action from them. And again, the email was a carbon copy. It was not a direct email to the town. Unfortunately, the state's Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Protection Office used a staff person's email rather than the official email address for town administration. It's unfortunate that the email did not get to the board, certainly. However, again, it was not an email that was directed to the town. It was an FYI, basically. Nonetheless, we've issued a reminder to all departments that state permits for local project be closely examined as to any potential town involvement and shared with town administration, that everyone in town administration understands how to handle these notifications. And we are working to ensure that the official town email address for town administration is conveyed to state and other agencies, since it can be quite common that a particular staff person may not be in the office when something is received. We have Attorney Pucci from Town Council's office on if the board has any further questions about the appeal process or the permit itself.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to have some questions, but can we go to Mr. Pucci first? Just a quick general question for everybody. And by the way, we will allow public comment on this for those online and in here. To Mr. Pucci, what would have happened if we would have could appealed? What could have happened? What could have we have done? And there might be a very too general of a question.
No, I think I understand the question. First, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This is George Pucci from KP Law, Nantucket Town Council. I just want to answer that question with a little bit of background information, which certain members of the select board may not be aware of, and also possibly members of the public might not be aware of some of the relevant history on this permit. The long and the short of the answer to your question, there's a very stringent standing requirement for appeals of these conservation management permits. But before I get to that, I wanted to give you brief relevant background as to the procedural and substantive events which led to ultimately this conservation management permit apparently issuing back in August of 22, I believe. There's been some controversy that has been raised that a copy of the permit was copied to various town departments. That was the ultimate conservation management permit. I can tell you, had that permit been forwarded to me, I would have responded to the town manager explaining what that permit was. And I also would have provided information for the board's clarification that if the board were contemplating any type of appeal of the permit, there's a very stringent standing requirement for appeals of such permits, which the town has been a victim of, unfortunately, in prior proceedings related to this project site. So, and that standing requirement is basically that you have to show actual injury, which is special and different from that of the public. And, that puts the town in obviously a tough position, because when you assert positions and appeal on certain permitting matters, it's usually in the public interest that you're pursuing that. So it's almost like the standing requirement that's set up under the regulations for the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act is set up so that the municipality itself does not have standing to appeal a permit related to that. That may be a small comfort to those who are upset by the tree clearing that went on a couple of Saturdays ago. And that's why I think that you definitely do need to have some history on the town's involvement in these proceedings leading up to this. And I should note too, my comments about this and advice to the board should not be taken as any type of blessing, on the type of tactics that were basically employed by the developer in this matter. And my advice never intrudes onto policy considerations. And so don't take it as though I am commenting on policy, but as a matter of, good conscience and neighborly behavior. It was definitely a hostile act the way the developer went in on a Saturday morning with dramatic tree clearing activities. And I can tell you, I started getting emails and text messages very early in the morning on Saturday. I scrambled to respond to this, as did people working for the town, including the town manager and the deputy director of Plus, who went out immediately to that project site. So, these comments about this permitting procedure with natural heritage really have nothing to do with any type of blessing on the type of tactics that were employed. It certainly would have been nice, as a matter of courtesy, to get either a phone call or an email or some type of notice the week prior to the Saturday tree clearing, so that people could have looked into it and advised the town accordingly before this was happening on a Saturday morning. Having said that, the relevant process for this is somewhat frustrating. This goes back, the rare species issues with regard to this project site go all the way back to 2018 and before that. Originally, the town with the Board of Selectmen, then the Board of Selectmen, now the Select Board, directing town council to work on these rare species issues on behalf of the town. We had retained through the town manager, Danielle Odell, and another consulting company to look at the rare species and habitat issues on this project site, on the Surfside 40B development site. We sought access to the site to conduct a survey through Ms. Odell and the consulting company that specializes particularly in the issue of habitat for northern long-eared bat. And what happened as a result of that process, both the developer denied us access to the site, the 40B process denied us access to the site. So the town was never actually able to go on site and conduct survey information. And we requested this every which way but loose, both through formal proceedings and just cooperative efforts with the developer, but we were denied site access. So from there, Ms. Odell conducted surveying off-site, but in the proximity of the site. And in her opinion, and she is basically the expert for this species on Nantucket, in her opinion, observations that were made off-site in immediate proximity to the site showed compelling evidence that there was habitat on-site for northern long-eared bat. So in follow-up to that, we filed an appeal. There was a take determination issued by Division of Fisheries and Wildlife in October of 2018. And what a take determination is basically the state, this Division of Fisheries and Wildlife looks at a site, looks at their regulations, and they make a determination as to what, if any, rare species, both plant-wise and animal-wise, would be taken as a result of development activities on that site. And depending on what that take determination is, then they go forward and they have requirements either prohibiting certain activities or conditioning those activities on site. And what the initial take determination was in October of 2018 was that the project would result in a take only of the coastal heathland cutworm, which is a moth, MOTH moth, listed as an endangered species under the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act. However, that take determination declined to find habitat for another plant species that we had identified on site. And it also failed to make a determination that it would result in a take of northern long-eared bat or northern long-eared bat habitat. So with the expert, Ms. Odell, we filed an appeal of that take determination. And that appeal was also joined at the time. The Nantucket Land Council appealed the take determination, and 13 residents had also appealed that initial take determination. The result of that appeal was that the town's appeal that we filed on authorization by the select board and the appeal of the 13 residents who also filed appeals of the take determination were dismissed for lack of standing. And that standing requirement is the one that I laid out for you under the regulations. It's basically impossible for residents to comply with, and basically impossible for the town or any municipality to comply with in order to maintain an appeal. And again, the purpose of that appeal was to say, you got this take determination wrong. You need to add northern long-eared bat habitat onto your determination. That was the purpose of that appeal. We were dismissed for lack of standing. The 13 residents were dismissed for lack of standing. And but the land council, who serves as custodian for a lot of the parcels for Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, was found to have standing. So they got over that threshold. So as a result of that, with the board's authorization, the town manager's authorization, we provided the expert witnesses to the Nantucket Land Council to go ahead and pursue that substantive appeal, because we knew at the time that it was a futile effort basically to appeal that standing determination. But if we could have that substantive information presented on appeal through the Land Council, that would achieve the same purpose. So that was what the decision making was at the time. And now, again, I'm going back a few years as to what occurred. Land Council went ahead with that appeal. Those appeals end up with a administrative appeals process in the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. And that resulted in a 52-page decision issued by Fish and Wildlife that was adopted as a final decision in December of 2019. And that basically upheld the take determination and rejected the Land Council's evidence that was presented through the town's experts, the expert, particularly Danielle Odell. The 52-page decision from Fisheries and Wildlife, if you're interested in environmental issues and rare species, and particularly with regard to northern long-eared bat, I have to say it's pretty infuriating to read it, because it's almost Kafkaesque the way it goes around the issues, and it cherry picks provisions of the regulations which favor upholding the take determination and then ignores anything else. And the thing that's most Kafkaesque about that decision is, in one respect, it says, we're denying any access to the site. We're not going to order the developer to survey the site, and we're not going to allow you onto the site to survey the site. Then it goes on to say, and by the way, the evidence presented by Ms. Odell for evidence adjacent to the site that shows compelling reasons to believe that there is habitat on the site, we're going to reject that evidence. So it's like you can't have it both ways. So they don't want to take the evidence of showing why it's habitat on site, but they also want to deny access to the site. So in any event, if you're interested in reading that 52-page decision, I commend you to it. It would be a frustrating experience if you're interested in preserving habitat for northern long-eared bat on that project site. It's really quite a frustrating decision. Remember, though, at this point, we're not an active litigant in this. We've been dismissed for lack of standing, and we've turned over the litigation to the Land Council. The Land Council then did go ahead and they appealed that 52-page decision to Superior Court. And that case was then adjudicated in the Superior Court that resulted in a May 10, 2021 decision of the Superior Court affirming the state administrative agency, Fisheries and Wildlife, and basically that 52-page decision sticking by the original take determination. Now, what ultimately happens as a result of all these procedural and substantive proceedings is that culminated the take determination, which was limited to the one, the moth, the coastal heathland cutworm. That proceeding then led to that conservation and management permit, which issued last August of 2022, and again, which was copied to various people in the town. It provides an appellate procedure, an appeal to Superior Court, but again, the same standing requirement applies to that permit as did the earlier proceedings. And so, and again, actual injury, which is special and different from that of the public. So that's almost, it is impossible for the municipality to prevail on. It's impossible basically for any group of residents to basically prevail on. So that is where we're at for the permit. So if, you know, that permit were provided to me last August, essentially the recitation that I just gave to you, which I'm trying to be as succinct as possible, because I know I'm giving you quite a mouthful at one time, would have been in my advice to the board that this permit issued, we're no longer really a party to this. The same standing requirement applies. If anything, I would consult with the land council as to whether they're going to, you know, try to seek any further relief on that permit. And basically the end result of that permit that happened, they stuck to permitting and conditions related to the species found in the take determination, but they also added a time parameter to the tree cutting that could occur on the site. And basically that was, again, Kafkaesque. They're saying that northern long-eared bat shouldn't have been included in the habitat determination, but they're including a condition that protects during the so-called pup season for the bats, which is June and July. So basically it allows for the tree cutting between August of one year and then May of the following year, you know, to account for, to not disturb breeding habitat if that's underway during that time. So
George,
hopefully that answers your question. I'm available to answer any other questions you have.
Thank you, George. I think it's helpful to understand the background. But does any board members have any comments or questions for George, or just in general before we open to the public? Matt?
Yeah, just, you know, so George, you were not aware that this had happened in August, correct?
Correct.
All right, yeah, because that is my biggest concern. You know, maybe we would have done something, maybe we wouldn't, maybe the land council would have done something. The part that is frustrating to me, this is the second time. There was another, you know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, we almost missed a deadline, and Megan made us aware of it, and we've got the application and stuff in. And so this wasn't the first time, this is the second time that I recall. And so I think that's the part that was frustrating to me, was that we met as executive session as a select board a week or so after this came out. Maybe it was 2 weeks, but we weren't aware of this and George wasn't aware of it. And so yes, it was informational, but it's informational, but that has to then be passed along to town council when you're in this type of situation. And that's the part that I'm struggling with and not happy with. And that, you know, we can say we have to do better, but you know, we can say it, but how do we ensure, you know, what I'd like to figure out in the future is how can we ensure that we actually do better, you know? So that's that's my sort of, yeah, that's what I'm pleading, is to how do we do better? So.
Thank you, Matt. Malcolm?
I agree completely with Matt. I guess what troubles me, I understand what happened. I understand the notes were informational. There was no requirement for various town staff to push it on, but I think there's a judgment issue here. Something obviously as controversial as this, even if there was no requirement to send it on, or it was just getting information, I would think someone who received that note would say, hey, wait a second. This is a very important issue. I know I don't have to tell anyone, but I think someone should have raised their hand. And to me, that's a matter of judgment, not of regulation requirements. And that's what bothers me more than anything else. And I think I agree with Matt. We can say, oh, we got to do better, but we failed here. And I'm sure that people in town that had this email thought they were being okay, doing what they had to, but we have to think a little out of the box sometimes, particularly when, my God, this is one of the hottest issues on the island. And also, we have to remember our second priority here. We're going to hear a report about that tonight, and that's the environment of this island. And I think we all failed. At one point, I remember last week, Mr. Atherton thought we should maybe have someone else look at it. I kind of struggled with that all week. I'm not sure that would happen and would find any more information than we've heard tonight. We have to do better and use some judgment. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Brooker Don? Don, I can't see you on my computer. Okay. So I did speak to the town manager about this today, of what are we doing to rectify this to make sure this doesn't happen, not with Surfside Crossing, but anything. And we talked about it. And so I think the town manager can send the select board just an email of what we're doing differently, from email addresses to anything like this that's permit related has to go to XYZ, and just make it a system. You're all set, Brooke? Okay.
It doesn't have to be every permit. We don't need to get, we don't need to get a passive aggressive, well, here you go, here are all the permits we do.
No, I don't mean to us.
I
just mean
understand, but what we need is like something that is, judgment related, like, Malcolm's saying, something that we're in, sort of a situation where we're negotiating or we're,
Yes.
in appeal or whatever. That stuff needs to have someone within the government that owns it and is making sure that it gets to the right hands at the right time. That's,
Yeah,
and I think you mean that. I'm just
that's
saying that.
exactly what I meant. Not a permit, not a liquor license permit or anything like that.
Yeah.
No, and not to us, but going to the town manager email, and then it can get to where it needs to go, town council or whatever.
One more thing, Mr. Chairman. Yes, please. I mean, since I took on this responsibility, my email has mushroomed several folds. And I don't want to spend my entire life reading emails. I get enough personal emails every day. Again, we just have to just think. Thank you.
Eric, is there any hands up on this?
I've got two hands.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's go.
I'm going to let Megan Perry in.
Sure.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, Megan.
Thank you for taking my comments. My first comment would be that I am fully sympathetic to the loss of a family member and how devastating that is. I'm very sorry for that. I am, however, struggling with a department that has a budget of $1.6 million not being able to function because one person is on extended leave. That doesn't fly for me. So then looking into some of the correspondence with Natural Heritage sent this conservation management permit out to what they called relevant entities. And it's a policy that they send it out to relative entities. Those relative entities are the select board for towns, the planning board for towns, and the conservation commissions for towns. Some of the reasons for that is conservation commissions do have jurisdiction over open management plans. Open conservation management plans, which is what this permit was going over. In this permit, their version of an open management plan is roughly 2 acres. I think I brought this up last week. That comes out to be about 20 feet on the front of South Shore Road, 10 feet on all other sides. 20 feet is not a habitat. That's something that could have been appealed. That's something I would have appealed had I known about it. This permit was sent out to those boards. Somehow staff made the decision to not pass it on to those boards. And I've asked through, again, pesky public records requests, did these emails from Natural Heritage get forwarded or replied to by any department that received them? The response from the Nantucket Town IT department was no. So staff didn't even bother to discuss this from 3 different departments. That to me is inexcusable. Why is staff making decisions about information addressed to the boards or commissions? Elected officials cannot represent their constituents if they are not made aware of the information that is to be distributed to them. And this is we're in the midst of a taxpayer funded lawsuit. Why would this information not be passed along? It's not just informational, it's considered relevant by the state. I'm perplexed as well when the response from the Deputy Director of Planning is that this wasn't a plus issue. That doesn't fly for me either, because land use is part of plus. How did we not look into a conservation management permit and think, gee whiz, that has nothing to do with plus? Furthermore, how hard is it and how many resources are required to just hit forward? That's not hard. Everybody hits forward all the time. That being said, after the current quoted the Deputy Director of Planning and Town Administration, I submitted a FOIA request. It was just a simple request. I'd like to see the quotes on the email from the current to those departments and their response. That's really not a big deal. Like, that's a silly request. I get it, right? However, for some reason, staff made members of the select board aware of that. That's nothing. But a conservation management permit, the select board was not made aware of. I don't understand how my simple FOIA request about what the current wrote made it to you guys, but not a conservation management permit. That just, it doesn't hold water for me. So that's just some of my questions for right now. And I understand that Attorney Pucci did a fantastic job on showing the history, and that standing would be hard to find here, but we weren't even given the ability to try. Nobody passed this on to us. That's inexcusable. So for the Plus department to quote say, no action was needed from Plus, not okay with me. I do not allocate departmental resources toward permits that we are not involved in. Well, I spoke to the Conservation Commission last week, and they are allowed to be involved in open space management. So those two departments should. The end of the day, all of the departments, all of the boards and commissions that were supposed to be distributed this permit, at some point answer to the town manager and to the select board. And so I'd like to know more than, we're sorry, this won't happen again. I'd like to know how this is going to be resolved and what actions are going to be taken in the future. So thank you guys very much. It's very disappointing. It's baffling to me that something this large was missed by 3 different departments. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Anybody else? Erica?
You have 2 people. Do you want to do?
Okay,
follow-up
let's just do
first?
one more there.
Okay, Rick Atherton.
We'll go to Emily next.
Good. Jason, thank you. I appreciate the effort to bring forward the facts that the town and now can understand what occurred, and Mr. Pucci's going back over the matter. I just want to raise something a little tangential, and that's the 2015 item that was also missed in a different context when the county commissioners and the select board voted unanimously to pass a resolution that required staff follow-up in filing documents, as I understand it, with the town clerk. They apparently were not filed. And to this day, other than it becoming public a couple of weeks ago, I'm not aware that anyone understood that resolution was not effective and existed as a proper authority from the town. And I think that also needs a way to understand why that is the case. Was it just a simple mistake? Who should have filed it? And I think hearing about that would also be helpful. I have one other public comment, if you would grant me, Mr. Chairman. And that's that when I came home on the Quidnet Road, brush cutting had occurred during the day, and I'm a big fan of that. So I want to thank all the town people who undertook that process. It looks great. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Emily?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emily Molden for the Nantucket Land Council. And I just want to thank Attorney Pucci for all of the background and history that he provided at the beginning of the discussion. As you heard, the Land Council did work in partnership with the town early on with the original appeal of the take determination back in 2018. And we were extremely pleased to be awarded standing, which really was because of our 45 years of work protecting rare species and habitat on the island. But as he suggested, the appeals process ultimately was very frustrating because the Superior Court judge ruling essentially acknowledged that while the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program could have requested additional surveys for northern long-eared bat habitat on the site, they simply chose not to. As a party to the take appeal, we were entitled to notice of the permit. And as has been revealed, we're not on the notification or distribution list. We certainly regret not learning of the permit sooner so that we could have exercised our right to appeal before the destruction of the habitat on site. As has already been suggested by many, it's also very regrettable that the notifications that were given to town departments didn't make their way directly to the select board and especially to town council, given the town's involvement in appeals for this matter over nearly 5 years. The Land Council is continuing to explore the circumstances around the issuance of the permit, but in the meantime, we also would request or strongly urge the town to continue working on implementing a new strategy or process for communicating internally on the progression of projects like Surfside Crossing. We also strongly urge the town, the select board and town agencies to continue to scrutinize this project. Its proponents have certainly demonstrated that they will go to virtually any length possible to avoid or short circuit appropriate regulatory review or the participation of the town and the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily. Anyone else?
Two more. Bruce Perry.
Okay.
Thank you, Select Board. This is Bruce Perry, property owner and former resident of Nantucket. To me, it's just, and also as a former staff member for the town, I just don't understand how staff did not feel it was necessary to forward a copy of this permit to their boards. It's not up to them to decide what's important for the board to have in their inbox or on their packets during their meetings. You know, the Concom has packets that are hundreds of pages long. You know, attaching an email or 48 email, you know, doesn't use up the staff resources. And that only takes 30 seconds because you already have them on their list. So my biggest problem is the process issue is that the permit was sent to department heads and also to the general mailboxes for the Concom and the planning and the plus department, excuse me. And so there's another layer of people that didn't forward it to their boards, and they should have. It's not like the project was unknown to all these departments. They know it's been controversial for 4 to 5 years, and still they decided not to do it. And what I also don't understand is that historically, there's usually, you know, staff meetings held by the town manager. And I can't believe that no time till January that this permit didn't come up among the staff members. I mean, everybody's sitting in the room talking about things that are going on. I just heard at the beginning of this meeting, there was a interdepartmental meeting on PFAS. So apparently that was important enough to get all the department heads together and talk about. But a project that's going to cost the town millions of dollars, result in a project that, you know, is unsafe to live in, didn't rise to the occasion. So, and lastly, rough calculations, the email went to department heads and people in the town of Nantucket that have roughly a $500,000 annual salary when you combine them all. That for $500,000, I would expect more interest in town activities than this permit received. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Is this a new one, Erica?
Joan Stockman.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for all of the very detailed explanation, Attorney Pucci. I just have a super quick couple of things to say. I'm curious to know what the usual process is for forwarding the kinds of permits that we're talking about. So this was the conservation management permit. I'm really curious to know, in the past, is it a selective process that whoever's receiving these documents, and particularly in the Plus department, are they making a choice about whether or not to forward it? I can't think of a more kind of incendiary topic than Surfside crossing at this point. And I'm so deeply disappointed. And I feel like the choices that were made to not let the pertaining boards know about it, to not fill in the Conservation Commission, to not tell the Select Board that this permit had been issued, I feel like that directly harms me, and it directly harms the people of Nantucket who've been fighting this development for going on 5 years now. And I also, the last thing I want to say is that I am stunned that nobody thought it would be a good idea to inform the town's own lawyer, who is currently, has a lawsuit pending in Massachusetts Superior Court, that it never occurred to any of these employees. And again, I understand that in one case there was mitigating circumstances, but that nobody had the thought that they could tell the town's own lawyer what had happened. So thanks so much for hearing me, and I hope you all have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Joan. Any other comments from the board? Malcolm?
I was just wondering, based on a couple of comments, you talked about staff meetings. Are there minutes to these staff meetings?
No.
There are no minutes.
No, it's not an elected board. There's no open meeting law. There's no staff meetings. I'm sure they have action items when they leave, but no. And which staff meetings are you referring to?
Well,
All
the
of them?
comment was, we talked about emails, but there was a comment made that there are staff meetings. We're just wondering if this item was discussed at any staff meetings after we received, or after Plus and after Concom received the emails. Just wondering.
Nope, not that I'm aware.
Because if there was verbal communication, not just email, people do talk to each other. They just don't spend their lives sending emails.
Any other comments? We're going to move on to public comment soon. Matt? Not that, we're going to move on.
Okay.
This isn't a public comment or a public hearing, so I think we heard repeating information each time. Thank you, everyone. Okay, moving on to public comment. Is there any public comment tonight for items that are not on the agenda?
You've got two hands raised.
Yep. Step on up. I don't see the hands.
And
Oh, here, sorry. I was looking for the hands here. Yeah, go
now
ahead.
there's one, Robert Bates.
Okay.
Bob, can you hear me? You have to unmute.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Go ahead, Bob.
Sorry, I just screwed him up. Bob, unmute again.
There we go. How's that?
Good.
My name is Robert Bates, and I'm contacting you to bring forth a potential concern in regard to landfill operations. On November 1st, 2022, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection made significant changes to 310 CMR 19, Solid Waste Management Law. The changes that have occurred would negatively impact having negatively impacted Nantucket as follows. Commercial organic material disposal. Effective November 1st, you cannot no longer dispose of more than a half ton of commercial organic material in any 1 month. So a landscaper, a contractor clearing a lot, anybody like that, they bring anything across those scales, they're limited to 1,000 pounds per month. Mattresses. There's a ban on disposal of mattresses. All mattresses have to be yeah, they have to be returned in and taken care of. They can no longer be disposed of. They can't, like waste options when they ship them off island. We need to know where they're ending up because every piece of that mattress has to be recycled. The big one too is that textiles. There's a ban on the disposal or incineration or transfer for disposal at solid waste facilities. I was on the phone for roughly an hour today with 2 different people from DEP. The definition that they used for textiles, and it's written right in the law, is clothing, footwear, bedding, towels, curtains, fabric, and all similar products, unless they are contaminated with bodily fluids, mold, etc. Understandably, these changes will require significant discussion. Commercial organic waste includes the food from restaurants, grocery stores, and other like facilities. How is the town going to manage and make sure that this is taken care of? As I mentioned, all of the clearing a lot, cutting trees, lawn waste, etc., that all needs to be managed at the landfill. The young lady that I spoke with at the Department of Environmental Protection, she said that the majority of communities are putting up a textile bin so that the textiles go into that, and it has to go into a recyclable waste stream, not a non-recyclable waste stream, a recyclable waste stream. It needs to be handled and it needs to be documented and taken care of. As I said, I believe our mattresses are already recycled. I looked at the intent of 310 CMR 19 and quote, "It is intended to protect the public health, safety, and the environment by comprehensively regulating the storage, transfer, processing, treatment, disposal, use, and reuse of solid waste in Massachusetts. These laws apply to all solid waste facilities, of which, according to the Department of Environmental Protection, affect their list from January of 2020, a facility at 188 Nantucket Road is a solid waste facility. I would ask that the Board of Selectmen determine if our landfill is being operated properly under all sections of 310 CMR 19 and also under all other applicable solid waste disposal regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. You said one more hand. Any other public comment here tonight on items that are not on the agenda? Okay, there's no new business that I know of. Can I get a motion for approval of minutes for February 11th and February 2nd? Approval, sorry, I'm doing them all. Approval of payroll warrants and treasury warrants altogether.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call, Brooke?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Matt? Aye. Don?
Aye.
Jason, aye. That passes. Now we're moving on to reports. Offshore wind update, a Mayflower wind presentation. Mayflower wind is now South Coast wind, but it was already in our agenda. They're going to give a report. And there's probably a lot of people who want to speak on this. So they're going to give the report. We'll open up for select board comments and questions, and then we'll open it up to the public. When you are talking, please direct everything through the chair and not directly towards anybody else here. So if you have any questions, I can push them over to anybody else. I'll remind you that doesn't happen. Okay,
great. Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. And I believe we had the slide deck loaded up here. So I'll just wait for that to come up. Great. Well, thank you so much. And Mr. Chair and board, thank you so much for having us. And also want to extend a thanks to Holly for her hospitality this morning, and also our friends at Cultural Heritage Partners who helped us set up the events for the day. And we're happy to to give you our update on our project here presently. As you mentioned, we were formerly Mayflower Wind, now South Coast Wind. Changed our name last week, reflects our initial delivery of 1,200 megawatts into Brayton Point, and also sort of the location of our project. It was also the working name that we had for our first project. Next slide, please.
Did you state your name?
I'm sorry.
For the record.
Yeah, Dan Hubbard on behalf of South Coast Wind. The project we find ourselves at a kind of a critical moment here in energy consumption need here in the Northeast. In the last decade or so, there's been about 7,000 megawatts of decommissioned and retired generation, and there's another 5,000 slated to retire. Mayflower represents the ability to diversify energy sources from clean, renewable offshore wind. Our project is located south of the island. And mind sliding to the next slide, please. The project itself represents some massive benefits to the region. It's a large portion of the national goals of the 30 gigawatts by 2030. The cost for renewable energy is typically lower, and so there's savings to the ratepayer of over $2 billion over the life of the plan, and also displacing and eliminating over 400 million metric tons of greenhouse gases annually. Next slide, please. Our project, as I mentioned, we're 23 miles south of the island. The project was awarded the lease area in 2018. The area is about 127,000 acres, and it's capable, we project, of producing up to 2,400 megawatts of energy. That's about enough to produce or to support 1 million homes. We are planning 2 interconnections. This is sort of the nature of interconnections in the ISO grid system, is that they're limited to 1,200 megawatts. So we're planning for our first delivery through that line to the left, running up to Brayton Point, and we're also examining interconnection into Falmouth. With that, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague. I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Thank you. My name is Kelsey Perry. I'm the Community Liaison Coordinator for South Coast Wind. So I work with our local communities on the Cape Islands, South Coast of Massachusetts and Rhode Island. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is the site layout of our lease area. As Dan mentioned, it's about 127,000 acres or 199 square miles. We have agreed to a 1-by-1 nautical mile grid layout in our lease area. All of the other lease areas in the southern New England cluster have also agreed to this grid layout. So it's uniform across our lease and all leases. This was an agreement that we came to with the United States Coast Guard and other maritime users. We also are committed to using ADLS or aircraft detection lighting system in an effort to reduce nighttime visual impacts in the lease area. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot from our 3D virtual model. I wanted to include it just to show a demonstration of what it would look like in the lease area. This type of project does not yet exist in the United States. Vineyard Wind is the first one who's working on construction right now in Barnstable. This is our 3D model, which I would be happy to show at a later date. It's on a really fancy laptop since it uses a lot of data to run the model, but essentially we've modeled what our project will look like from the turbines out in the lease area, our export cables. We have onshore construction simulations in Falmouth of both horizontal directional drilling and the trenching. So happy to demonstrate that to anyone who would be interested in seeing it virtually. What this is showing is in that yellow circle, I know it's somewhat hard to see, but that's because it's small, is a 90-foot vessel. And that's essentially what a 90-foot vessel would look like traveling through the uniform grid pattern in the lease area. Next slide, please. So this is our wind farm design from the turbines all the way to the points of interconnection. Sometimes it can be difficult to visualize all the different components together. So this schematic is helpful for that. Our turbines, as mentioned, are about 30 miles off the coast of Martha's Vineyard, 23 miles off the coast of Nantucket in federal waters. Our turbines will be connected through inter-array cables that connect to an offshore substation. From there, this is depicting our project for Falmouth. So the export cable will travel underneath the seafloor, approximately 6 feet underneath the seafloor, but give or take, there's a range depending on boulders, benthic conditions and whatnot. The cable will travel underneath the seafloor for 45 miles to reach Falmouth, where we will then use horizontal directional drilling to make landfall. This is a proven method to avoid the sensitive coastal interface when making landfall. Essentially, a vessel will sit offshore and insert the cable in a parabola shape deep underneath the beach, somewhere between 25 to 50 feet. And from there, the cable will come back up or remain underneath the road to where it would reach our HVDC or high voltage direct current converter station. We have 2 options for that converter station in town, which dictates the route options. And from there, the route will finally connect to Eversource's existing point of interconnection in North Falmouth, where then our clean renewable energy will be distributed to the regional grid system. So we are planning to deliver our power to the ISO New England grid. And that means that really anyone who is a utility customer of National Grid, Eversource, the major utilities will benefit from this project, whether you're in Provincetown or Pittsfield, all alike, we're all going to benefit from this energy. Next slide, please. Quick update on our permitting process and where we are with this. You may have seen this graphic before. It is from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management website. This is the permitting schedule for the federal process on the top and the state process on the bottom. So for the federal process, as you can see, currently we're in that orange phase. We submitted our construction operations plan to BOEM in February of 2021. BOEM prepared their or issued their notice of intent to prepare our environmental impact statement in November of 2021. And we are expecting our draft environmental impact statement from BOEM hopefully next week. So we are moving along on the permitting process with BOEM. Once that draft environmental impact statement is released next week, it will kick off a 60-day written public comment period, and there will be public comment meetings towards the end of March on that process. For the state side of things, we're working with the Massachusetts Energy Facility Siting Board and the MEPA office. Most recently, we submitted our draft environmental impact report to MEPA for our first 1,200 megawatts to Brayton Point. And I will note that all of our permitting documents are available on our website. If you have questions on where things are or want me to point you to certain sections, I am more than happy to do that. Next slide, please. This is a very quick snapshot of our studies and assessments overview. I won't go into all of them, but as mentioned, we acquired our lease area in 2018. So we've been in the permitting and development phase for about 4 years. We have completed a large swath of surveys from marine mammal studies, socioeconomic impacts, wetland delineations, and so on. These studies are what's going into our permitting filings that is currently happening. Next slide, please. So we know that visual impact is a key interest to the Nantucket community. We did not include this on the slides to really show the impact, but more that we have this study. If some of you were with us during our community drop-in today, we have 11x17 printouts of our full visual impact analysis that I'm happy to provide folks if they would like 11x17 copies. But essentially, this is just one quick example of a viewpoint from our visual impact assessment. This is the baseline. And if you want to go ahead to the next slide. And then this is the with the turbines in view. So again, our project is 23 miles off the coast from the closest point of Nantucket. Next slide. Economic benefits. So any major large-scale energy development project comes with economic benefits. South Coast Wind has invested over $115 million so far in terms of different investments to help stand up the offshore wind industry in the Commonwealth. Some of those investments are focused on particular organizations and initiatives on the south coast of Massachusetts and Cape Cod. Others, for example, like our funding with Mass CEC or Massachusetts Clean Energy Center are really just larger buckets of funds that we hope that communities with innovative ideas around research and technology, workforce development, supply chain development may be able to benefit from those buckets of funds. Of course, outside of these investments and jobs, there is reliability benefits. So having this resource in our backyard is truly amazing. Wind is stronger during the winter when peak loads are highest. So this will help with our grid reliability. It comes with upgrades as we work to get all of this power onto the grid. Of course, there's supply chain opportunities as well. We have not selected our tier 1 suppliers yet, meaning our turbines and our cables. Once we make that selection, we'll have a better idea of where local suppliers can take place, but we have been doing our best to involve local suppliers so far by using local print shops, AECOM for some of our survey work, and so on. Next slide, please. And just one program I wanted to highlight. We have a lot of different programs, as I've mentioned, so happy to provide further examples, but this is one of them focused on diversity, equity, inclusion. So South Coast Wind has a commitment to have protected species observers on all of our vessels during our survey work. And as we move into construction, we have 4 to 6 PSOs on every vessel. And this program is aimed at Native American communities. We believe that traditional ecological knowledge is really something that we should be using when developing these projects. So this program is aimed at Native American communities and individuals who would like to become a PSO. It's cost-free training. Everything is covered, and we're working with our partner RPS to make sure that there is a job at the end once you have this training in place. We have 3 graduates of the program so far, and 2 of them have been deployed on our survey vessels. And I believe that's the last slide. Yes. So this is my email address. We are switching over to kelsey.perry@southcoastwind.com, but I will still get any email that comes into mayflowerwind.com. So don't worry about getting it right. Those are our social media channels. And I do encourage you to sign up for updates to stay in the loop on the project's progress. And again, thank you for having us. I know we're sort of introducing ourselves. That was a lot of information. So happy to take comments. And as we stated today, we look forward to coming back at a later date as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any comments, questions from the board? Brooke?
Erica, can you go back to the slide that showed the research that they've done? This one. I'm trying to see if there's anything on tourism impact. I don't see anything.
So I think that's a comment that was made earlier today, that perhaps further research on potential tourism impact would be helpful. And Nantucket-based tourism impact.
Thank you, Brooke. Malcolm?
Yeah, go back to the studies and assessment. Those studies, are these studies published? Are they available for someone to look at?
So there's a lot of various attachments. We have our director of permitting with us here as well, Jen Flood, who might know a bit better than me. So I'm trying to think of how many are public. Yeah, I want to say most of them are public. There are a couple of them, as we were discussing with the group today, based on sensitive information that are confidential. But most of our attachments of these studies should be publicly available on our website, on our documents page under federal permitting.
Right. Did you do the studies? Did you have outside people do the studies?
We hired consultants to do the studies.
But I can find them on your website.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, just I'm happy. Really happy to see ADLS is going to be, so that the planes trigger that only when they're flying over. That was something that we worked with VIII Wind. I'm assuming that the turbines will be painted the similar color as VIII Wind, so that they'll be less visible. That was something that was, I think it was a light gray was the color that came out to be the most, least visible. The other thing, would you be open to moving back? One of the things that they did, they moved back the front row because that was going to be the most visible. If when we go through this process, sort of the triangle that you showed, if some of those are close to the island and more visible, would you consider moving those back?
I will note that our lease area is a little bit further back, I think it's about 7 miles further south, but we haven't really gotten there in our conversations quite yet. So, I mean, we're open to listening.
Okay, but you're taller too. So you're further back, but your
We
structures are
haven't
bigger.
selected our turbine yet. So as soon as we do, we'll definitely let you know our selection and the final height.
Right. Okay. Because and then you guys spent a lot of time today on the historic view shed and the impacts. So I'm not going to repeat any of that. But I think that's that was one of the biggest issues we had, with Venue Wind was, it's uncertain and it could be substantial. And so I would hope that you will be willing to, take that into consideration when we get to that level. I think that's kind of important. And then I'm assuming we didn't necessarily deal with the mammals and the animals, et cetera. That's not in our purview. But I think that will be something, that I'm sure you talked a lot today, and you can probably hire this one in the front if you need some help. And yeah, what risks do you see to the community? Like, when you look at this, how do you picture it? Are you saying there are no risks? Are you seeing there are risks?
No, we acknowledge that, as we're moving through the Section 106 process, we do recognize and have stated that the view shed is an adverse impact. So we've been open about that, and we're continuing down this process to try to figure out, what mitigation is really going to work here.
All right, great. I think I'm set. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Just a couple of quick questions. Is the substation? That was just a graphic. It looked huge. Is that, in our view, is it right off the shore of Falmouth? And then the other question is, you said peak loads are highest in the winter. Is that just for New England? It doesn't seem like our peak loads are highest here in the summer versus the winter.
So your first question on the converter station, I don't have the height of the converter station off the top of my head. Oh, the offshore.
Yeah, it looks like it's 300 feet tall, and this is giant oil rig type of, yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely won't be that big. I don't have the exact height of the offshore substation platform, but we can definitely send that to you. But it won't be any larger or really look differently compared to the turbines from Nantucket's view shed.
Is that closer to the land, or is it further?
It's all contained within that lease area.
It could be farther from landfall.
Oh, okay. I see. Got it. Okay.
It's just when you look at the pictures, it's in the distance and it's sort of a square box instead of a tall, and you can.
And the peak loads highest in the winter?
That's just kind of on average in terms of ISO New England's grid.
Okay.
So our regional grid system shows that peak loads are high in the winter because of heating, but it is a regional grid system. So I'm from the Cape too. So I mean, the tourism impacts, we do have high loads in the summer as well. But overall, for like grid reliability and our system reliability, it makes a lot of sense and is great that wind speeds are a bit higher in the winter months to account for that from a regional perspective.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Don? I can't see you. Okay.
You have two hands raised, Bruce Mandel and Abby Camp.
Okay,
I
let's
think
go.
Bruce was first.
We'll do those two and then we'll go to those in the public. Any comments or questions? Yeah, we're going to go to two people online, then I'll go to here.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Oh, thank you very much. Bruce Mandel. Mr. Chairman, I have 4 questions briefly that I'd like to address to the presenters. Matt mentioned that he was happy that the ADLF system will be used. But the language that is being used by this presenter, as well as Vineyard Wind, is that they are committed to use ADLS. And we've asked this question before without getting a good answer, so maybe Kelsey could help us. Your slide said you're committed to using ADLS. So my question is, has the ADLS system been approved for offshore use by BOEM and the FAA? That's the first question. You want me to give you all 4 questions at once?
Yeah, let's just go right to the questions and not all the background.
The other question is, how many miles of undersea cables are going to be tied together in that subsea area? The third question is, you made a very nice presentation, a representation of what the grid is going to look like with these turbines set at 1 mile intervals with a 90-foot boat. And that representation, however, did not show the support structures. And the question is, how many of those support structures are going to be installed? What will they look like? And shouldn't they be shown on that representation? And my last question is the cabling, the undersea cabling. Will you be coming to the Nantucket Conservation Commission for an easement to go through Nantucket's waters with your cables? And will you commit to using low EMF emitting cables? So those are my 4 questions. Thank you.
Well, Bruce, I think you snuck in a fifth one there at the end.
I did. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Bruce. Do you want to answer any of those? I have them written down if you don't. Yeah, the ADLS commitment. And then has that been approved by BOEM and I believe FAA? FAA, sorry.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Flood. I'm the permitting director with South Coast Wind. And yes, the answer to the first question is yes. The FAA has recommended ADLS as a mitigation lighting technology, and BOEM has recently adopted that recommendation in an advisory circular that they are implementing. And they have also approved the Vineyard Wind project, and ADLS is one of their conditional approvals. It's in our construction and operations plan right now. So once our COP is approved, it will also be a condition of our permit.
Thank you. Second question, the miles of underground cables tied together.
So miles of underground cables tied together. I think that might be referring to kind of cable crossings and other developers who are working on connecting their wind farms to land. In terms of what's going through the Muskeget Channel, the Vineyard Wind is working on their project through Barnstable, and there may be one point of crossing there. But in terms of exact mileage for overlap, I'm not aware of that exact number, but there aren't miles and miles of cables overlapping. There's crossings here and there. That happens already in the world and in the ocean. Cable crossings, Nantucket has 2 cables from National Grid. Martha's Vineyard has a couple from Eversource. So cables do cross, and we do anticipate that happening in a couple places, but not miles of overlap.
No, the question was not about.
Oh, no. Erica, could you take Bruce off?
Oh, sorry.
Support structures. They weren't really on the visuals.
Yes, so that was just a screenshot. The 3D model does include one of our offshore wind substation platforms. So I'm happy to provide a screenshot or show that model with that in there. Our copper construction of operation plan includes anywhere from 2 to 5 offshore substation platforms, depending on what we'll need. But our full lease area has 149 positions total. So there won't be more pieces of infrastructure than that. So for example, if we had 2 offshore substation platforms, we'd have 147 turbines. There won't be more than 149 structures in the water.
Thank you. And the last one was the cabling. Do you need a easement from the Conservation Commission here in Nantucket if it's going through Nantucket waters?
To our knowledge, we're not going through Nantucket waters. Our export cable corridor is much closer to the eastern side of Martha's Vineyard, going by Chappaquiddick Island. I believe the Nantucket jurisdiction is 3 miles out, but I could be wrong on that. But we're pretty confident that our cable does not go through Nantucket waters.
Okay. And if it did, you would have to go through our Conservation Commission.
We would,
Yep,
yes.
for an easement.
Yep.
Right.
And then what was the last one? Was it low? It was shielded.
EFM.
Yeah.
EMF, yes, we recognize that's a concern for community members. I will say that both of our cables to Falmouth and Brayton Point are using high voltage direct current, which is a bit better for magnetic field ratings because it's similar to the magnetic field ratings of the Earth. EMF stands for electric magnetic fields. Electric fields dissipate almost immediately. So magnetic fields are really the concern. But as I mentioned, our cables are buried 6 feet underneath the seafloor. They will be shielded. Magnetic fields dissipate fairly quickly. There's lots of studies and research out there on the different effects on different marine species. Some marine species like to stay away from it and have a little bit of effect. Others have no effect at all. So we're aware of that. And we have EMF studies that are available on our website to read through, and happy to answer more detailed questions as folks read through those materials.
Thank you. We'll go to somebody who's in here. Is Cliff still here? There, yeah. It's probably most fair if I go online, in here in the room. But
Cliff Williams, 11 Somerset Road. I'm the ILS technician for the FAA at the airport. I'm not speaking for the FAA, but I was here maybe 6 months ago, a year, I don't know what it was, to ask questions. And I did get information about the study for the ILS that goes into, maybe not into this field, but there is a field of windmills that it goes into. The ILS goes out 18 miles and the wind field is just 12 miles out. I know when Cape Wind was trying to put their windmills up, we had a lot of studies, and we were involved directly at the Nantucket airport. The FAA was, but we haven't had any meetings. We don't see any documents. They didn't send me any information showing of a study that the ILS wouldn't be affected, although they had an aviation safety group, I guess I'd call them that did say that the windmills could only be 300 feet tall for the first 3 or 4 miles into the wind field, because obviously it was an air traffic pattern. So it just seems like we've put the cart before the horse. I would, at least at the FAA, I do impact studies first, and then I meet with the stakeholders, and then we do the project. We don't lease land and do a project and then see if the airplanes are going to fly through the field. So like I said, I've never been involved in any study with the ILS for the impact. And if they say they have studies, that's great. I'd love to see them. Thank you.
thank you, Cliff.
Hi, Val Oliver, ACT Residents Against Turbines. I went to the presentation, well, it wasn't a presentation, a drop-in today, and spoke with these guys who were great. I did come away feeling like there isn't a whole lot of answers to a lot of questions. And I would just say on the front end of this discussion, we have to think about it not as just an individual project, but as a cumulative impact to our island. There's going to be 7 of these side by side, collectively the size of Rhode Island. So to assess each one of them one bit at a time, I think is working against us. So I just wanted to point that out. There will be 33 years between construction and decommission for this project. Again, I just want to reiterate, there'll be many other projects which are starting at different times. Vineyard Wind is first. That's a lot of years of construction. So just keep that in mind. One of the key factors of the PR campaign, because I did look through their slides before I went to the meeting with them, was that this renewable energy was going to be clean and it was going to be a low cost. And my question to them was, is there a guarantee of this low cost? Because wind projects are notoriously very expensive. And if you look at any places that actually have them overseas, their prices are sky high. And I think that that is important to think about for consumers. They claim they're going to eliminate 4 million metric tons of GHG gas annually, but there is no metric to back up that assertion. It's theoretical. I did read the volumes, volume 1 and 2 of their construction and operations plan that they have online with BOEM. And they even point out there is a lot of things during this 33-year operation and maintenance construction process with vessels, generators, paints, coatings, sulfur hexafluoride, and other sources that there is going to be adverse air emissions. So I would like to see more real data comparing what's going to be expended and what actually will be saved or avoided, and see where that comes out. I just think we need to be mindful of how this is all going to weigh and the pros and cons. ADLS lighting does not exist yet. I know that because I'm in a lawsuit with Vineyard Wind. Everybody claims they're going to use it, but it hasn't been developed yet. The caveat is or comparable at the time of construction. I am concerned about the EMF cables through Muskegon Channel, but I guess these guys say they're not going to be there. I was wondering if there was a study on monopile foundations. They've never been done in areas like we live with strong currents and cold temperatures. So I'm just questioning the data on that. I did look at all of the assessments that they have for visuals, and I wrote them down. You probably don't want to know the ones, but I would say, please look at them, everybody who's interested in this online. It's really important. What you saw presented here is very different from the composition online. That's all I'll say, and especially at night. I'm appreciative of the protective species observers, but the problem with that is that these whales that we're concerned with aren't always detected by the monitoring system, and they stay underground, they stay under the water a long time. So visually they can't be seen and they can't be heard. So I think a little bit more has to go into that area for sure to protect them. And lastly, I would just say, I really don't know that there's any circumstances that turbines are going and the industrialization of our ocean is too steep of a price for Nantucket. I mean, we are bearing all the risk for this theoretical solution, being pitched these wonderful unicorns and rainbows, but nothing is backed up with hard data. And I would just say, at what price do we put our island on that? Is there a price that would make that okay? Thank you.
Do you want Abby first or?
Yeah, let's go to Abby and then we'll
Hand raised.
go to you next.
Abby,
Hi.
go ahead.
I'm actually here for the elderly spot, but I was listening and I read this article in Bloomberg Business Week, and I'm worried. It talks about the safety and the responsibility if something goes wrong with the turbine. The article is about breakdown of towers and blades have bedeviled the manufacturers in the US and Europe. And that's a question for the speaker. Who is responsible if something goes wrong, like a blade falls off or there's some sort of disaster? Who would be responsible for that? Thank you.
Thank you, Abby.
Hi, good evening. Amy DeCibio. I'm a summer resident here on Nantucket. First of all, I want to thank Mayflower Wind for, I guess we've got a new name now. That's actually a question I have, is why the name change? But that's not my primary reason for talking. I think it's great that they've come here to speak. I think what's unfortunate, though, is that the public on Nantucket is largely unaware of any of these wind projects. And I think one of the problems is when the wind company, this one and the prior one, come to speak in February, there are no summer residents and a lot of the local residents are gone. We see how many businesses are closed at this time of year. And I think for this process to be transparent to the public, we need to do a better job. I think there are several reasons for that. Some of them are not your responsibility. The NGOs that should be advocating for the North Atlantic right whale and marine life and the environment from the other side of this argument have been compromised. Many of them big ones. Audubon Society, Sierra Club, New England Aquarium, Mystic Aquarium have taken money from the wind companies. So I don't really think their voices are independent, and they are not supporting the wildlife that they proclaim to support. They instead have pivoted to offshore wind as the panacea for potential climate change. Again, I think this select board has also done a disservice to this community. I've spoken about this before, but the good neighbor agreement that was entered into with Vineyard Wind has done a disservice. It not only gave up Nantucket's rights to stand up for its National Historic Landmark status, of which we have not just Section 106 protections, but the most stringent 110F protections, but it also, you agreed to support the Vineyard Wind project at the local, state, and federal levels. That means no discussion on the risks of these projects. I think it's interesting also to note that with all due respect, the folks from South Coast Wind referred to our lawyers as their friends. They're good friends. I think Cultural Heritage Partners had a duty to protect this island for its National Historic Landmark status. And instead, we've decided upon some mitigation measures that have now muzzled the very people who are supposed to be representing this community. I think this is important. I drove up here from New Jersey today to speak. In New Jersey, I'm sure you've seen in the national news, we've had more than nine whales roll up on our beaches at an unprecedented rate. The reasons are unclear, but I can tell you that the folks from Clean Ocean Action, who are a very well-regarded environmental group, these are the ones that pushed against Christine Todd Whitman when she was in charge of the EPA and really pushed to have the drug companies shut down so that we didn't have needles and trash rolling in on the beaches in the New York and New Jersey area. And they stood on the beaches of Atlantic City demanding that this federal government put a halt to these projects until we find out why these whales are dying. Whales have been dying. The uptick in whale deaths have increased since the surveying began. NOAA originally said otherwise. I hope they changed their mind on that because the data shows otherwise. As survey boats have begun their work with their geophysical and geotechnical testing out there, we see whales dying at higher rates. So why is that? The thoughts are that their hearing is being impaired and that they are now essentially, a deaf whale is a dead whale, putting themselves in harm's way, possibly with vessels or having trouble foraging for food or getting lost from the pod or whatever. So I really ask that this council really thinks long and hard about this and that we really need to have a better discussion so that the community understands what happens. I know that the good neighbor agreement that was signed by the town along with Mariah Mitchell and Nantucket Preservation Trust, those contracts, conversations were held behind closed doors. But the problem is the community is unaware. And I think it's about time that we have some more honest discussion about this. Lastly, with respect to the ADLS, it's interesting that that's been approved, what the woman referred to from South Coast, but has this technology been put into effect anywhere? Have we seen it? Does it exist anywhere in the country? So I guess the two real questions I have are about that. Is that system in use anywhere in the world? And the second question is why the name change from Mayflower to South Coast? Thank you.
Thank you. I think Val said that it's not in use yet, but if you wanted to respond to the ADLS question and why the name change.
It is in use on onshore wind farms, but not offshore in the US right now.
And the name change, as I say, began with was it's reflective of our commitment to deliver our first project in Brayton Point. Our first project's working name was South Coast Wind to begin with, so it made sense for us to change it over. Thank you.
Peter?
Peter Burke with the Chamber of Commerce. We are just want to say thank you to South Coast for coming out and making themselves available to the public and for the Residents Against Turbines for bringing up some really important questions. I think our group's challenge from the Chamber's perspective is we're trying to be educators and advocates of the process as opposed to the content in the first part. So we want to listen to the community and their concerns. We want to listen to the proponents and their plans. My request or my ask is a clear timeline that includes hard dates. I think that's something that's come up in other projects recently. So if, as an organization from the select board, a calendar of key dates where we can notify the public to say, hey, these are the deadlines that have come up, and also a scope of purview from the select board. I know that not all these decisions rest in your hands as select board members. Some of this is federal waters, and I'm not as educated to say what the entire scope of this board has. So if it's something that has to happen at a state or federal level, I'm not asking you to know all those rules either, but a clearly defined timeline and who's holding what baton would be extremely helpful. And I'm happy to help out if we can as an organization, but we are trying to do our best from a process standpoint to educate the public and our business community on the steps that are being taken with this project. And of course, the idea would be that whatever path we pave here helps out with the next project and down the road. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. To go back to what Brooke was saying about affecting tourism, which is a big part of what the chamber does. And is there a specific timeline now, or is it more of like the spring of 2024? Is it that? How's the timeline now? And will it get more defined as we go?
Sure. So right now, our timeline is really based around our permitting. So as mentioned, we are expecting our draft environmental impact statement next week, which will kick off that 60-day public comment period. If all goes to plan and there's no delay in the permits, and there's no saying that there won't be any delay, we hope to have all permits in hand by 2024 to start onshore construction on the first 1,200 megawatts to Brayton Point in Somerset at the end of 2024, and that means we would start offshore construction in 2025. So it's still kind of a loose yearly timeline, but we hope as we continue down this permitting process this year, we'll be able to continue to narrow that in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Holly Backus, Preservation Planner. I just want to address Peter's question about timeline. I know there's going to be a lot of constraints that's not going to really be select board focused, but I just want to mention that whenever any of the wind farms, whether it's South Coast or it's anybody else, wants to have a public engagement, which we obviously encourage, we can only ask them, which we have been. We will work with them on scheduling that and getting that information out to the public. So we appreciate the chamber's assistance with the town, because town staff can only do so much. So we appreciate that.
Holly, are you and Lauren Sinatra the main contacts with any wind?
Yes.
companies?
So Lauren and I are the two staff liaisons for the local work group that we have established. There's representatives from the nonprofits, some of the town organizations that we don't have a set schedule when we meet, but when we do, we like to have that engagement. So again, we appreciate any type of public engagement that we can help facilitate outside, obviously, of the federal regulatory review process, which again, for the record, I represent the NPDC through the Section 106 review process. There's a representative from the HDC, as well as the Historical Commission, and of course, any of the other local organizations.
Thanks, Holly. Greg, did you have anything?
Yes, please.
Before we go back to online.
Good evening. Greg Werkheiser with Cultural Heritage Partners, the special legal counsel to the town for offshore wind projects. Our firm, working with Holly's office and a lot of the folks in the city, pushed for and set up the series of events today so that the public could have an opportunity, not the first and not the last opportunity, to ask the folks on the other side of the aisle, physical aisle, as many questions as they want. They have committed to coming back. They've committed to coming back in warm weather when there's more people here. But it's important that we get this conversation going and expedited, because the permitting process, under intense political pressure from Washington, is moving along quickly. And so we don't want you to get to the summer and say everybody's here, and hear from us, you've missed any of the chances to provide feedback. So it was important to get this conversation going immediately. We had the pleasure of sitting in on and listening to the public ask questions today. I wouldn't attempt to summarize all the topics that came up. I would just draw the public's attention who's listening to this to one particular topic to keep paying attention to. And that is the potential impacts on heritage tourism economies of your viewshed being industrialized for the next 30 years. The folks from Southern Coast said again tonight what they said throughout the day, which is that they are hearing the concern from the community about those potential impacts. That's good. That dialogue has to continue. But right now, there's a massive gap between what the papers say in terms of what the parties are filing in the regulatory process and the potential threat to the community. Just give you some quick math, stick with me. Most of the offshore wind companies are taking the line that says that the impacts of this industrialization will be minimal in terms of heritage tourism. Some of the companies are even going further and saying, oh, it'll be good for heritage tourism because someone will pay $30 to take a boat ride out. Of course, they don't tell you that they won't take a boat ride out for $30 for 30 years in a row, which is the number of years that they won't, some of them won't be coming back to rent properties on the island. One of the developers, who's not in the room tonight, but this is relevant, consistently told the federal government that story. Could be positive impacts, no negative impacts. And then they accidentally disclosed that they had an internal study that showed that the people who go to the New Jersey shore on a regular basis to see the unobstructed Atlantic viewshed, enjoy the beaches and the historic properties down there, 15% of them will not come back. 15% of Nantucket's heritage tourism economy multiplied by 30 years is $815 million out of your economy, not including a single dollar's worth of reduction to property values. Where we are in the 106 process right now, the discussion between the town, BOEM, and this particular developer is early, but it's moving quickly. The first draft plan that the developer has put out in terms of mitigation for your potential risk of $815 million is to pay for a study, a survey of your historic properties, the value of which is about $50,000. So 30 years of risk, generously, according to industry's own study, about an $815 million risk to your economy, not including inflation, and $50,000 on the table. So I want to believe them. You want to believe them, that we're going to have a robust discussion about how to close that risk gap. Because as we discussed today, if we're going to solve global climate crisis, everyone is going to sacrifice. You all have told us as your council, we're not anti-wind, we're not anti-clean energy. We want to save the earth as much as everyone else, but the balance cannot be, the burden cannot be placed exclusively on the community, with the benefits going largely to the companies. And so there's a lot of road to cover in a very short period of time. And of course, in Washington, they're talking about making the regulatory process even faster. It's one thing that Democrats and Republicans at this moment in time actually agree on, which is they want to fast track the already fast track piece. So I hear the voices of folks saying, hey, you know, you lawyers, you're too quick to figure out deals. We're telling you, pay attention, because the next couple of months, not necessarily when everybody gets back and it's warm and everyone's paying attention, but the next couple of months are crucial. And we have to put this dialogue between the company and the community not necessarily babysat by BOEM, because BOEM is doing a terrible job as a regulatory agency complying with the framework that these folks accurately put up a framework of what BOEM says it's supposed to be doing in the process. And both for historic communities on the East Coast and for tribal communities on the East Coast, they're just really messing it up. They're messing it up because in the best of intentions, they think that if they move faster, they'll get the president's agenda of wind distributed faster, but they're actually hurting themselves by creating litigation risk and skipping those regulatory steps. So I think it was a good day. I think you referred to us as your friends out of politeness, because believe it or not, attorneys can still do that. Not because we're not on temporarily opposite sides of a very important issue to the community. So we're available both through the board and directly to try and answer any questions about the regulatory process. We're here for you. I think we are going to make some progress, but that conversation has to occur quickly and seriously, or because of the rapidness with which this is going, we'll end up in a litigation posture, which will both delay their project potentially and be harmful to the community in terms of your ability to predict your future from a sense of place in the community and your economy. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg.
Just a quick question, Greg. I think we're in better shape, right? Not shape, but we're in a better position than we were with Vineyard Wind. I would say right now we're ahead of it. We were playing catch up in that at that point, I would say, and that is what we negotiated there. Does that mean that's what we have to do everywhere, or is each one a separate?
They're all different.
Right.
They're all separate. Matt, you pointed out yourself that while some of the turbines that are proposed are further out from shore here, they are taller, or they're likely to be taller because they need to get the maximum amount of energy out of that piece. I was delighted to hear that there wasn't an immediate no to the question of potentially moving some of the first turbines back. But some things have changed for the worse in conditions out there. Vineyard Wind was one project that you all had to consider at a time. There's 20 some projects going on up and down the East Coast right now. We're helping you on 6 or 7 of them. BOEM is understaffed. I'm also aware that you need to catch a, yes, no, right. Yeah, it is a lovely place to stay overnight, but I also understand that you have a ferry to catch. And the fast tracking of these projects from Washington means that steps that we were able to, even though we were engaged kind of at the last minute of Vineyard Wind, we were able to eventually get the company to focus. It's happening really quickly now.
Even faster.
And so we all need to be paying attention. We all need to exert polite but serious pressure on our conversants to really take this seriously more quickly. Any other questions from?
Yeah, one other comment was, if ADLS isn't allowed, one other idea is to have you agree to retrofit it when it is allowed. Sort of that's one of the concerns I've heard tonight. And the other thing that we've talked about previously is there any way to sell energy directly at a set cost to a municipality? And I'm not sure that's going to be in your financial structure, et cetera. Is that, that would be something that, as a financial guy, that'd be something I'd want to consider if it was possible. So those are all my comments.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Matt. We go to the hands that are up online.
We now have 4. Just
4. And just
first is Rick Atherton.
okay, we'll go, Mr. Atherton. But I know at some point you guys are gonna have to go, and we know that. So if you need to go at 7:30 or 7:25, just give us a wave. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Atherton.
Jason, thank you. I'm always impressed if someone comes to Nantucket from New Jersey just to talk to you. They feel strongly on the subject. I just want to make sure that that you share our prior agreements, which have been well advertised in the local press, to pay a lot of money to Nantucket over time. are related to what you're talking about tonight. I, for one, am not quite sure I understand that relationship. I think it would be helpful. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Rick.
Next, we have Veronica Bonnet.
Hi, how are you?
We're great. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a few comments. I appreciate Greg Workhouser's comment, and I know a lot of people are working hard for Nantucket on this. One of my concerns regarding who we're getting information from goes back to that good neighbor agreement, and our information about these projects should not be coming primarily from the developers. They're skipping over a lot of really important information that impacts Nantucket. I didn't hear anybody from Mayflower or South Coast Wind tonight talk about a study out of North Carolina showing an 80% reduction in tourism. 80% of people said they wouldn't come back if wind turbines were built offshore. I didn't hear anybody from Mayflower Wind talk about the potential dramatic changes to the ecosystem. The size of these turbines have never been done before. NOAA, which is part of the BOEM approval process, has expressed concern that of all places to put these, where the Labrador Current and the Gulf Stream meet, and the way the phytoplankton and the water column works there, once that's dispersed by the wind and the vibration, that cannot be mitigated. Our tidal waters come in and out of that area, but they're not telling you that. And you're relying on, I don't know where Nantucket is going to get the information that's credible if the town itself doesn't ask all of the people involved in conservation on Nantucket to weigh in on this and to learn about it and express their concerns. Our group, Nantucket Residents Against Turbines, we're not scientists, but we're presenting a lot of scientific information, and you, the select board, should be hearing from people that are more in the know. And there's plenty of people on Nantucket that could be in a position to share this. However, the Good Neighbor Agreement silences even the Concom. I went to the Concom meeting last year where they rubber stamped the Park City Winds, which is part of Vineyard Wind, same company, more cables going through the Muskegon Channel, unable to ask questions because of this Good Neighbor Agreement. And I'm very, very concerned about that. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. Regarding the ADLS lighting system, I appreciate Mr. Fay's comment that maybe it could be retrofitted. I'm speaking to you from Wyoming. I drove past a field of wind turbines not more than 2 weeks ago at night. That you don't want to even look at them for a week when they're flashing at night. That would be the end of tourism on Nantucket. It is a very, very difficult thing to look at. So that's all I had. I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Veronica.
Joanna Roach. Oh,
go ahead. Yep. Good luck catching your ferry.
go ahead, Joanna.
Hi. I had the opportunity today to sit with the folks from South Coast Wind, and they did do a good job of answering a lot of questions that were asked, but some of what we talked about, I don't think got mentioned here tonight. And I share this just as information that I think everybody should have when we are in the process of learning about the bulk of these projects. One of which is I wanted to echo the fact that it is important to think of this as an aggregate with 1,600 windmills and 30 years of construction. One of the things we learned today is that, and I had heard this but wasn't confirmed to me, was that the Falmouth power grid won't be ready to accept energy from any of the wind farms until 2030. And that's that date is an estimate and still not a guarantee. The other thing that was new information, I thought, was the technology timeline. Essentially, by the time that we are at the end of the 30-year construction cycle, the first windmills that are built will need to be decommissioned because they will no longer be technologically viable. I think that's something to consider. And I think that, you know, from a height reference, someone mentioned today that the Empire State Building in New York City was 1,250 feet tall, and that these windmills are 1,066 feet tall. So I think that those are good things to keep in your mind. And then also the other thing, and it's a term that I had heard and wasn't exactly sure what it meant, was the incidental take. And that is refers to the numbers of North American right whales that are allowed to be, I'm going to use the word eliminated, during the process of construction. So it's a percentage of the whales. And when you kind of look into that a little bit further, you start to understand that there are 73 female North right whales or 78 female North right whales left in the world. And so being at the top of the food chain in terms of biodiversity, that's a problem for all of humankind. So thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. Diane Coombs had her hand raised and now it's down, but I know she's had an issue in the past, so I'm going to check in with her to see if she wants to speak. Diane, you're muted.
All right, there I am, Eric. Okay.
There you go. Yep.
Thank you. I had some things I have just to explain to the people. I've lived here for 50 years. Every day, every week, every month, I've been involved in most of the meetings, concerns going on in the island for that length of time. One of the things I asked this company, Boehm, last May, almost a year ago, was about the cables going through the Muskegon Channel. It doesn't matter to me or to the existing wildlife and all the rest of it around it, whose channel, who they own. There is this heat that the existing cables give out. And there are at least 147 cables, if not more, going through. And I understand the heat is at approximately 160 degrees, which is going to heat up the water where that is. We have, over the last 2.5 months, seen such an increase in the death of the whales, humpback and whatever you want else, including 2 young newborn whales that both died. This is what we are about. The company says that the tourism will improve and that people will come and want to buy it. It said on the channel this morning that people will want to come and to buy accessories, and our tourism will increase. They have got to be crazy. What we do have is at night, in winter and summer, people go out to Nantucket to watch the sunset. It is perfect. And yet at now, it will not be that way. You cannot, this Boehm cannot say that this is going to improve our tourism to look out at the turbines. Somebody has a responsibility to not take this island and destroy it. It has been a leader in historic areas, and it is fighting for its life. And it isn't that it will decrease tourism. It's going to kill the island. They cannot say that this is true. The cost of doing what they're doing is unbelievable. Have no final numbers of how much it's going to save the people of this area on electricity, truly, because they haven't done it. We are a dark sky area, one of the very few left. And there are things of the lights going on and off and whatever are frightening. And it was mentioned tonight that it is incredible. Nantucket paid them for the agreement $16 million, or they were paid $16 million. 16 million. We sell houses at more than $16 million. It's beyond me how we sold ourselves out for that amount of money. We were given a choice, either do it and get money or don't do it and get nothing. This is not the offer that should be made by this country to a place that exists. And we have got to have public meetings. Everything is closed. I have been on the line since 11 o'clock this morning because I was told that was the first meeting, 11 o'clock. I am unable to stand up, so I can't walk, so I couldn't get there. But I was going to get there by Zoom. I came on the Zoom and a voice came across and said, "Is that you, Diane?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Hold on, we'll be right back." Never came back. Never made the 11 o'clock meeting because I could not get there. I couldn't do the 2 o'clock or the 4 o'clock meeting because I can't walk, not through anything of mine. That's what I have to unfortunately live with. So their lack of human concern is frightening. Public meetings, stuff that they do should not be closed, should not be available. I asked for 2 or 3 questions and I was told that was not available to me. I'm on the committee. Why isn't it available to me? There has to be public meetings. We should not go on any further until there are large public meetings that are advertised so everybody knows them. Maybe we won't start with a big group to begin with, but half the people or more that we talk to have no idea what's going on. I am asking for whatever's been said tonight has been excellent and informational, but how many islanders got to see it? So we need to do this. We need to do this. We need to put our feet down because otherwise you could kiss Nantucket gone, as it will just be a hump of dirt in the ocean. And that's all it will be if we don't stand up and fight to see how it should go down.
Thank you, Diane. Is there
Thanks.
anything else? We have other people waiting
No,
to
that's
speak.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you,
Hey.
Diane. Erica? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said there was 2 more.
Nope, that was it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Diane. I thought there was more people waiting. Is it? Yeah, Andy, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Andy Lowell. I'll begin by speaking in behalf of the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board. I learned just yesterday that there was an invitation-only meeting this morning for the presentation from South Coast Wind. And I was curious as to why SHAB does not have a seat at that table, an invitation to that type of meeting. And I don't know who, selected what boards and commissions were to attend that invitation only meeting. But for the future, whomever that is, I'm hoping that SHAB can be considered.
Yeah, I don't think it was invitation only, but maybe it was. Holly?
Mr. Chair, thank you. That's about our internal work group that we have. Concom does have a seat at the table. So, that's something that I'm not too sure how originally 2018, 2019, when this was all put together through the first review process. But we have representatives, and I will say for the record, sorry to Diane, we had issues with the owl this morning. We were over in plus. So that was what she was referring to. There is, off the top of my head, Joanna represents MMA, Mary Bergman represents MPT, I represent NPDC, Diane represents HDC, Tom Montgomery represents the NHC. We have a FinCom member, Stephen Morey was there. We have, I think that's all, but they're on the top of my head. Sorry, I can't remember. But Concom is a representation. And Maureen from Nantucket. We do not have right now a FinCom member representative, so that's something that we are working on, and I have sent an email to town manager on that. Again, if that's a committee that is told to be put on there, great. Staff will do that, but I'm not too sure how the makeup was originally set up.
So I think Mr. Lowell is saying Shab would like to be involved, and if it's okay. And
I don't see a
listening to
problem.
Greg, we only have a couple months of a very important window.
We'll get them on the
Okay.
on the work group.
Thank
then.
you, Holly.
You're welcome.
I did attend the presentation from 2 to 4. There were a lot of questions asked that were not answered, and some of them pertaining to possibly the quality of our water or the quality of the wildlife here. I realize that South Coast Winds project is outside of our 3 miles, and I respect that. The horses out of the barn with Vineyard Wind having their cables coming through Muskegon Channel. I think it's safe to say all of us have seen footage of deformed lobsters, and there's questions about silt plumes created from the pile driving of these. Nantucket gets 2 incoming tides every 25 hours. How far do these silt plumes travel? They're going to enter our harbor. We don't know that. They can't answer that question at this point. Nantucket has a very dwindled fishery. We have one seasoned lobsterman from the island, and we have a fledgling lobsterman who just started last season. He's made a large investment in his boat and his gear, as has the seasoned lobsterman. And Shabs advocates and considers conditions for our fishermen. And are we to expect that they'll be harvesting deformed lobsters from this project? We don't know this, but it's questions we'd like to have answered. On a personal note, I'll step aside from Shab. You have to ask yourself, are we playing with fire here? I realize Nantucket is a very small voice, but maybe we could be a large voice. Nantucket was once the largest killer of whales in the world. Could we possibly be a small voice that's very large in saving whales? You have to question yourself with these whales washing up on the beaches and on Long Island in New Jersey, and the carpet bombing of sonar testing to determine the density of the ocean bottom for where they will be pile driving. Well, how does a whale get around? They have their own God-given navigation system. Is what is taking place currently out there with this sonar bombing affecting the whales. They're not entangled in lobster gear, and they haven't noticeably had any ship strikes. So I think Nantucket should take a stronger stance. Please don't consider accepting good neighbor funding until we really have all of the answers. There are a lot of questions to be answered, and they haven't been answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Anyone else? Erica? Any other comments here tonight? Everybody else okay? All right. This was, I think, very enlightening for the board, and appreciate everybody who came out to speak or drove from New Jersey or had their hand up online for an hour. I really appreciate it. Any last comments from the board? Here we go. Scott Leonard, who doesn't live here anymore, was a big whale advocate, and he once said to me, the construction and work that's done in the ocean is like being in if you've ever been in an MRI before without the headphones, that's what it sounds like to a whale. Just to give you some context.
The difficulty we have is we're going to be in a situation we're going to potentially have to make the best choice we can based on, what is going to be happening. And I think we're very fortunate to have very good counsel in this regard they're informed with what's happening in Washington. They're informed what's happening in the industry. So we may all wish for one thing. It may not be, we may not get exactly what we want because of what's happening in Washington. So we all have, I think we should be pushing, and I think we should be doing what we're doing. But I also think we have to be, temper people's expectations, because I think this is really, there's a push for this, and I'm worried that, I'm worried of what's going to happen. So, it'd be great to say we can wave our hand and stop it all, and we just keep it the way it was. I'm not so sure that will be realistic in 2 months or 3 months, and I think the select board is doing the best it can on your behalf. I think this is a separate negotiation. It's a separate situation, and we're taking that, all your comments into consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt. And the two things I heard tonight that I like, I think Greg said them, was closing the risk gap, and then the burden cannot be placed solely on the community. So if it's going to happen, we have to mitigate it and do the best we can. Brooke, you good?
I mean, I think that some of the public comments, people think we have more power to affect this than we do. I think we need to be careful to use our voices and the authority that we have, and be good advocates for our community, and recognizing that there is a train on the tracks, and there's only so much we can do. So just being pragmatic about that, and doing the best we can with the tools we have in our toolbox to minimize the impact on us, because at least at the moment, it doesn't look like we have the power to stop this. So.
Val?
I just have a question actually for your counsel. Is mitigation money the only solution here? We have no other recourse. We can't say no.
You can absolutely say, no, we won't support this under any circumstance. That's one side of the option. In the middle is you can say, we don't support this, but we acknowledge, and I'm not saying this is the case, some of these projects are not going to proceed, but largely because of global economic conditions, cost of steel, a whole bunch of other stuff. The middle position is to say, if it is coming and we alone can't stop it, what is it that you want to create the best out of a untenable situation? And then the third is to just attempt to litigate. I don't want to say things tonight publicly about both the strengths and weaknesses of U.S. preservation law and the tools that we have at our disposal, because this is being recorded, and I don't want my opposing counsel to sense any of our strategy. There is a scenario in which you say, we're opposed to this of any circumstance, it proceeds anyway, and you haven't negotiated for changes to the project design, and you haven't negotiated for any resources to invest in countermeasures that could reduce your risk. So you always, as a community, have a choice between standing on principle but getting nothing, or figuring out when the threshold is, when you press your leverage as much as you possibly can. Hope the outcome is that a accumulation of factors maybe slows or stops some of these projects. But then it's our job to help you figure out when is the point at which you lose all your leverage. And legally in the United States, there's an answer to those questions, because the regulatory process gives you leverage, gives you leverage, gives you leverage. And then at some point on a certain date, it doesn't. And once you get past that certain date, the company has the ability to say, hey, got my permits, don't need you anymore. Good luck to you. We've said we want a 30-year relationship, but I don't believe any of them when they say they're in this for 30 years. I think they're in it for the 3 years necessary for them to do their jobs and then move on to the next thing. So that's a long answer to your short question. But absolutely, some people will take the position that under no circumstances should we ever strike any kind of settlement with any company. They're comfortable with the community not having the ability to ask questions about ADLS, not having to have the ability to negotiate for the reduction of rows of turbines, the height of turbines, the color of turbines, the maintenance schedule of turbines, the decommissioning requirements of turbines. There's 30 different things that we negotiated that no one really pays attention to in the Vineyard Wind piece, because those are the details that aren't as sexy.
The environment piece.
All that stuff. But I know I'm rambling here, but when we say environmental laws in the US, or we say cultural preservation laws in the US, if we were in Canada and we had some tribes on our side, we could absolutely stop this project. Totally different legal structure than we have here in the United States. We don't, up there, they have kind of free, prior, and informed consent, where you have to get people to sign off in advance or the project doesn't happen. We don't have that here in the US. Now, we do have some laws that I think Will and Claire and I and my colleagues are the best at the country at leveraging, that most communities in this country don't know about and don't leverage to their advantage. NEPA, National Historic Preservation Act, and others. But those are rarely project killer laws. You can slow down the project. You can make people listen to you. You can negotiate for changes to the project. And that's the tool that we have. That's the tool that we're sharpening as quickly as we can. And that's the tool we're using as effectively as I think we can on behalf of the community. So if you want to ask a follow-up, because I took so much time.
Thank you, Greg.
What I'm gathering is the only recourse the town has is what the visual is.
Let's be careful not. If you guys want to talk out in the hallway, you can. You're going back and forth, and it's just, we have other people who want to speak.
Yeah, we got to be careful.
Yeah, I just want to say two quick things. I know this isn't Canada, it's the United States, but there are Wampanoag Indian burial grounds in the Sound, which is one of the reasons that the Save Our Sound organization is trying to garner national historic status for Nantucket Sound. There will be cabling that will be plow driven through Nantucket Sound. So I think that's one thing we should think about. I would also tell you that there is a group in New Jersey called Save Long Beach Island, Save LBI. Well, let me just back up. Our group, Nantucket Residents Against Turbines, mission is really all centered around the environment, but we are very aware of the other groups and what they're doing. But the Save the Long Beach Island crowd is very worried about their view shed. And one of the things that they are actually suing on is to ask that these turbines be placed out 35 miles so that they are outside the view shed. We all know that the horizon, we can see so many miles to the horizon line, but we have to remember these things are more than 1,000 feet tall from sea level. So they're really big. So I do think there are some, if we are serious about trying to preserve our historic status in the view shed, and we really are worried about tourism, that those are things we can ask for, pushing them out really far so that that is not an issue. And again, I do think the burial grounds are something else that could be considered. Thank you.
Mary Chalk, 7D Street. You guys make it sound like there's nothing we can do but roll and try to negotiate. I just want to point out, opposition is growing. There are 12 New Jersey mayors because of the whale deaths and the beaching of the whales in their towns. They have written a letter demanding the offshore wind activity stop until the cause of death is properly investigated. Representative Van Drew is also opposing this. Maryland's Andy Harris is also opposing. Falmouth Select Board has denied Mayflower Wind from coming up on their beach to take samples for the cable landing. Edgartown on Martha's Vineyard, their select board or conservation commission has unanimously denied Park City Wind permission to run their cable through their waters. This is growing. So I don't buy that there is nothing we can do but roll over and negotiate for money. Please fight for Nantucket. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so last comment, and we'll.
Yes, I just want to make clear for the record that if anyone interpreted anything I said as anything less than we're going to fight this tooth and nail using every piece of leverage, that would be a misinterpretation. And if opposing counsel from the other side is listening to this recording, I assure you that this town is not going to roll over. Absolutely not. We have an obligation to tell you that there are uphill battles, that sometimes you can kill projects, sometimes you can't. That's just us being honest with you, which is what we owe you as part of our fiduciary and our professional duty. But the outcome of a failure of BOEM to appropriately give you your rights to consult and have information, and the company's failure to fix anything that BOEM screws up is litigation. And litigation will absolutely cause the developer enough pain that they will then have to take you seriously. And we don't take litigation seriously because it's life consuming, right? And we don't make those threats idly. We're not making threats now, but I just want to correct the record to say no one is rolling over. And you'll never hear us give advice to our client that this is a rollover situation. It is an incredibly tough fight when you've got 20 of these going on at the same time off the coast. But you have tools at your disposal. We are going to use those as vigorously as we possibly can within the time constraints that we have.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to Citizen Department Committee request. Department of Public Works request for acceptance of the donation of an elm tree located at 34 New Street in Sconset. Erica, you going to walk us through this?
Sure. Pam Murphy has generously donated this tree to the town of Nantucket. Both the tree warden and our town arborist are very much in favor of the town accepting this gift. Dave Shampoo has gone so far as to say it's a perfect candidate for a gift. So the pleasure is all yours.
I move that we accept the gift and issue a letter of thanks.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call? Brooke?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Jason, aye. That passes. Thank you. Application, introduction, review of applications and appointments to Council on Aging.
So you only have Abby on tonight. And she can speak on her application if she'd like.
Would you like to speak on this, Abby?
Sure. Sorry, I couldn't find the mute. The tonight is fascinating. I can't stop thinking about it. But I saw an opening for a volunteer position in the older community, and I said, well, that's something I can relate to. Firsthand experience with aging, and I believe I can sympathize with and help with what's needed. I know that the Marsh Center does a lot, but I'm sure there are some who have fallen through the cracks. And maybe there's some things we can do to help. I enjoy being a part of this community and would like to help out.
Thank you,
Thank
Abby. Thank you.
I move to appoint Camp and Lynch. Is that
Second.
appropriate?
Oh, Eric.
Sorry, and can I suggest that we appoint them to the two 2025 seats?
Yes.
That's a part of your motion, Matt.
Yes.
Second from Malcolm. Okay.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call. Brooke.
Aye.
Malcolm.
Aye.
Matt.
Aye.
Dawn.
Aye.
Jason, aye. That passes. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here tonight. Town managers report.
You're going to have Brian
Okay.
doing general fund. And do you want to do solid waste right after? Just back to back?
I would like to, if that's okay.
I'll just pull it up
Board.
since he's standing there.
So good evening. We're here to do the second quarter of fiscal 2023's basically the highlights and operational discussion for the general fund revenues as noted. Thanks, Erica. In the highlights was 29.3 million, which is about 1.4 million decrease over the same period last year. We're still looking at this, but based on the collections in January and February, property taxes are pretty much where we would be. There was a slight decline in the October through December quarter, but it doesn't seem to have been carrying forward. We're back on track with that. One thing to note that's does jump out if you look at the individualized accounts is that for the first time since the room occupancy tax was expanded, the second quarter of the fiscal year, which is always very busy, typically for rooms tax, for the room occupancy tax, actually had about a $600,000 decrease, which we had never seen before since this expansion. So it's something to pay attention to. In last year, the same time period, we received 5.9 million, and this year we received 5.3 million.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing there, Brian, we're going back to 2000 prior to COVID numbers. And I think that's sort of what I'm hearing from some of the retail. It's, you know, it's different. We had a couple of COVID winters. So
Sure, and it's also kind of an interesting offset is the fact that we collected more in room or meals tax during this same time period. So usually those were kind of in an alignment, but it's something we're paying attention to. The third and fourth quarters of the fiscal year are typically the slowest for room occupancy tax. So I don't think we'll gain a lot of measurable insight into next year based on the upcoming two quarters, but it's something that we are looking at. When you look at the year to date on the revenue side, you'll see we're still substantially ahead of where we were last year, primarily driven by the fact in the first quarter, we received about 25% more than we had on a year over year basis. So something we're looking at and paying attention, because I think there's still, as the town manager and I have said, there's still somewhat of uncertainty in how this is all going to normalize at. We still think there may be some changes or variations in that particular revenue source. So we are looking at it. On the expense, actually, I'm sorry, I wanted to note one other thing. I wanted to really commend the treasurer. If you look in this report year to date, based on her really aggressive cash flow forecasting and the collection rates of revenues, we've generated almost $600,000 in investment income, which is her working with the banks to make sure that we're getting the right interest rates and really being able to invest some money and probably with better cash flow forecasting. So it's certainly a big benefit to the bottom line for us in this year. So I want to make note of that. General fund expenses were down about 12% in the quarter, and then still probably in the year over year basis a little bit as well. One of the reasons is the Barnstable County retirement has been paid in July. It's put into a liability account, and then it's reallocated to the general fund and all the enterprise funds. That actually is planned and slated to be done in the third quarter. Last year, it was actually done in the second quarter. So not a really big concern in terms of expenses on a year over year basis at this point. We are certainly still tracking below, slightly below the operating authorization. So I think overall departments have been doing a really great job managing that. some of this, obviously, as we've discussed with the board, is also related to vacancies that we have in departments. So if hiring were to pick up, that certainly will change these numbers slightly, but all within planned operational budgets. Can you just go to the, you can go to the next one, which is the quarter revenue, please? Yep. So the first page of the revenue really just is itemized by the normal categories: real personal property taxes, excise. As I mentioned, we took in 29 million, which is just slightly about 5% decline on a quarter-over-quarter basis. As I did mention, property taxes are back in line with where we'd expect them to be for this quarter, and then that year-over-year basis currently. Could you go to the next slide, please, Erica? So as noted here, we've collected about 55% of the total bottom line. We've collected to date $67.6 million, which is about $2.9 million more. A great majority of that is about $1 million of that is related to the room occupancy tax. Local meals tax also has performed better than we had anticipated. So, but again, like I've said, we continuously internally monitor these. Maria Bisheva, who's the assistant town accountant, financial budget analyst, is monitoring these and reviewing them on pretty much on a daily to weekly basis. So we're very confident that we'll continue to hit all the benchmarks for revenue. You skip to the next one, please. Yep. This is just a quarterly breakdown of the expenses. As you'll see, most budgets, there are some overages in some budgets that we are working on. Some have to be journal entered into grant accounts, and some will be working on with the departments and potentially having to make potential year-end or ATM transfers. But overall, we are tracking in fairly good shape. So on the quarter and then on the year-over-year basis, we are about $800,000 lower. A lot of that, again, is really related to some of the vacancies that we have across the operation. So next slide. Next one, I'm sorry. Yep. Thanks, Erica. So this slide, we really just kind of show you what where the focus has been on capital expenditures. The largest one, obviously, was a town meeting authorized approval of Washington Street, 10 to 12 Washington Street, which was completed early into the October of the fiscal year. School athletic facilities, which was some borrowing authorizations, road improvements, town pier work, replacement of engine 4, the infrastructure for Waite Drive, which is very nearly complete. And that's a project that we're thankful is able to get underway and taken care of. We've been working very hard on the sidewalk improvement plan. So I'm happy to answer any questions about some of those projects if anybody has a question about an individual project. Town continues to maintain AAA rating with Moody's, one of only 16 communities to have it from Moody's, AA+ actually with Standard & Poor's. We expect that Standard & Poor's will eventually, most likely this year, get to do a ratings review to see, and hopefully we will get upgraded to AAA with them. As always, from our financial advisors, Morgan Stanley, who, next slide, please. Sorry about that. From our financial advisors, Morgan Stanley, who manage all stabilization, trust, scholarship funds, we generally put in what they're seeing in the market and how they've been managing those funds for us. And then the next slide is the market watch. Typically, we don't like to see a lot of red on this, but there's certainly things that we're looking at and see how where they were last year, and then also comparing them where we are today to see if we really need to have a grave concern. I think that most of these on this sheet will most likely change to green or even yellow, potentially yellow, but most likely green over the next 6 months as activity starts to pick up again. So I'm happy to answer any questions from the board if they have any.
Any questions for Brian? Thank you, Brian.
I just have one question.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just noticing that debt service seems to be higher based on second quarter. Is this just a specific of the second quarter, or what is the?
It's driven by a couple of things, and that's a really great question. So in August, we did a $40 million advanced sale of bonds, and which were not due and payable until in October. So all of the short-term interest related to those bond anticipation notes that we're authorized to actually permanently finance 120 days before the due date, all of that short-term interest on those bands actually would have hit in October. So that's why it was increased.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Solid
Solid
waste. So I'll take you through some of the highlights here. Revenue is up, which is a good thing. We do have an internal new billing clerk in the finance department who's done a great job working with waste options and invoicing and collecting of those receipts. So revenue is up this quarter about 34%, which is a positive for the fund. On the expense side, we do have a decrease in the second quarter of about 192,000. Not only professional services related to C&D, but the MRF professional services had a decline in utilization. We are seeing, as noted in the observation here, there's about a $277,000 increase in freight, which is everything being taken off island. It's becoming extremely more expensive when it's being brought off island. So we're seeing that increase. We're working very hard internally with George Aronson, the town's consultant, to really get a handle on that and make sure and understand where he thinks it's going to end up. But consistently, I'm getting calls from him. Off-island disposal has increased again. I think it's a struggle that every community is faced with. Certainly is exacerbated being 30 miles out to sea. So while we don't like to see large increases like that, we do understand where it's being driven by, and we're working to mitigate it to the extent possible. Can you go to the revenue page for the quarter, please? I'm not going to take everybody through all of these graphs, but if you have questions, certainly. No, the revenue, keep going, one more. Next slide. Yeah, I think. Right there. So the revenue, landfill fees, we will be advertising for a public hearing. It's time to redo the landfill fees on an annual basis. So that will be getting ready to be going out most likely in March. Tipping fees, where majority of the revenue comes from, as you can see, is up 239,000. Income and carry forwards is just a clear through for any POs that was open. So the next slide. So on year-over-year basis, we're up substantially, about 1.9 million. The majority of this is actually driven by an increase in the increase in the subsidy from the town based on a continuing reduction in retained earnings. So, but we are monitoring at the tipping fees to make sure that we continue to pay attention and get that increase to continue. Expenses, as I mentioned, were down about 197,000 on a year-over-year basis or per quarter. Next slide, Erica, for year to date. Year to date, we are up about 731,000. The majority of that is driven by freight increases, which we did touch on in the first quarter, and we're continuing to see that trend on a year-over-year basis this quarter as well. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions about solid waste.
Thank you, Brian.
It'll be interesting to, when you're doing the projections, to make sure you're looking at what Bob Bates talked about starting today. Because I've read a little bit about that online as well. And there could be somewhat substantial changes if those limitations are true and enforced the way that they're sort of been presented.
And the one good thing is that we, solid waste is ever changing and the way it's administered and the CMRs that come out. And, I can say that George Aronson is usually on top of those changes and is really great about working with us to make sure we're in compliance and understand, to give us the information to understand what any cost changes or cost implications may be. So I'm confident that we have a handle on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good, thanks.
Thank you, Brian.
We have Bob Eisenstein online, as well as Peter Holden, I believe, still in the back
Hey,
to
Peter.
do RL and home.
Welcome, everybody. Select Board. Appreciate it. Thank you, Brian. As I get more comfortable with this and start to understand the town's accounting system, hopefully improve each month. I want to start off with the highlights and whoever, Brian, who prepared this report, by the way? Can you tell her she did a great job? She actually did my job for me tonight. Okay, so we're going on to our last quarter, and the total revenue for the second quarter of fiscal year 2023 was $991,000, which represents a $157,000 or 19% increase over the second quarter compared to last year. The main drivers behind the increase are the Medicaid patient revenue and Medicare revenue, which was respectively 75K, 22%, and 57K at 79%. Secondary insurance revenue was decreased. The total revenue collected without the general fund subsidy and encumbrance carry forwards ended the quarter at 112% of the estimated budgeted revenue for the year. The total expenses for the second quarter of fiscal year 2023 were down $661,000. That's because the municipal retirement fund was paid in the second quarter of last year and hasn't been paid for the second quarter of this year. So overall, if we do not take in consideration this retirement expense, there was no change over Q2 in fiscal year 2022. The professional services have increased with $123,000, which is 79%. But if you carry over to the salary expenses, which decreased by $164,000, which is minus 14% over quarter two of fiscal year 2022, we continue to have some unfilled positions in various divisions, which is the travel nurses and some of the key administration positions that are needed to be filled within our island home. Also, if we look, utilities were up as well, 38% at $12,000. I want to skip the next page, was the island home summary, but
we have to step out. Chief Cranston, do we need to step out? I would think so too. So everybody online, we're going to step out until this fire alarm or this alarm goes off. So Erica, do you think we should adjourn and come back? We'll just take a break.
I hope the firemen get here on time.
In case I don't use that. I'm just being extra careful.
We're not done with you yet.
Thank you, Erica. Thought I could catch a break.
Are you gonna just acknowledge? the filer or something?
Yeah, I'm gonna wait till he turned the audio off. Are we back on? Okay, so thank you, anyone who waited. We had a fire alarm and we had to leave the building and now it's off. So Peter, you finish up.
Okay, let me just continue, try to make this as brief as possible. On the quarter census year to date, we increased 100 census days over last compared to fiscal year 2022. In each unit, if you use a blended rate with all the revenue sources we have, which comes up to $317 per unit, and we increased that by 100 census days. Going back to the bottom of the pie chart, right there, Erica, thank you. You will see that the prior year CPE receipts was represented 45% of total revenue, and then Medicaid represented 22%, and then Medicare 5%, and then the private patient was 21%, and patient paid amount was 6%. Okay, if we can move on to the next page. We compare quarter to quarter from 2023 actuals to 2022 actuals. You'll see that we increased our revenue by 19%, or the change was 157,000. Okay, but if we go to 6 months ending, and we will see the 3,000,004 in the actuals of the 1.8. If you take out the cap, the prior year CPE receipts of the 1.5 million, that'll give us a more visual picture of it, a realistic picture of 1.898 million minus the 1.897. It's really only 394. If we take out the prior year CPE receipts, which I like to do just to compare apples to apples. And moving on to the expenses, if you see on the quarter ending, total expenditures were 1.78 million and versus prior year of 2.4 million, which represents a 27 decrease, or $661,000. And then if you compare it to year, if we got 3.3 million versus 3.7, that was 11% decrease. I would like to go back to the summary page of, let's see, Erica, that's the Island Homes summary. Right after our Island Home financial highlights. Okay. I did a little analysis. I was with Bob, and we were trying to compare like apples to apples. How I would look at it if I was into like a private owned nursing home. Just bear with me how I did this. I hope you guys understand. We're trying to close the gap of what the expenses and bring up the revenue. If I take the actual fiscal year 2023 actuals, right, and it comes down to that 1.3 million. Oh no, yeah. You see where it says net earnings of 1.3. Now I want to change that figure a little bit. I'm going to take out the revenue, which was 3.4. I would like to take out the 1.5 prior year CPE. I would also like to take out the 1.2 transfer from retaining earnings and not consider that into these numbers. And what that would give me, and I also want to add back in the bonusable retirement versus what actually happened in the year 2022. And Bob and Brian, if I'm wrong, just let me know. Is that I come out if you look at the last 6 months of the 2022 actuals, right? That was 1.8 million, double that, that equals 3.6. But if you add it up correctly, that comes out to $3.7 million. Now, if I do the same thing for 2023, after I take out the 1.5 for the CPE prior receipts and a 1.2 million for the transfer for retained earnings, I come out with a negative 1.433. And if I double that, that will come out to a 3.5. So if we get those numbers correct, after I take out those two figures, fiscal year 2022 total was negative 3.7. And if I do that, we have a negative 20 on 2023, we have a negative 3.5 for the year. But we decreased the expense of the loss by 184. That's after I taken out the CPE receipts and taken after the retained earnings of 1.2 million. I just wanted to show that to you. Our goal is to reduce to close the gap on this area.
So you lost a little less in 23 than you did in 22.
Correct. But also, I also want to make sure that you know that I did took out entirely the 1,523,000 of the CPE of the prior receipts. I also took out the 1.2 retained earnings. I'm trying to compare the way I'm used to doing accounting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You took out the subsidies. Yeah.
Thanks.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Bob, do you want to add anything to it?
No, the only thing I would add is that I think big picture is the second quarter started to see a real turnaround for us in revenue. And we're projecting, I think we did the same thing when we did the FY24 budget report. So we're really projecting some significant revenue gains quarter over quarter, starting with the second quarter going through June 30th. And to Peter's point, it's looking like it's trending in the right direction. So we're very pleased. And the big picture, as he said, we want to close that gap of the losses that we're seeing and at least try to reduce the loss. And I'm very proud of the work they're doing, and it seems to be heading in the right direction.
Any questions?
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Next up is the update on the Select Board Strategic Plan, focus area of environmental leadership, water quality management plan goal. Mr. Carlson.
Good evening, everybody. I'll try to condense because I'm respectful of the fact that it's 8:18 and we just had a little fire drill to get going. And a lot of the stuff is stuff that we've covered with the board before that we include. But what we're really kind of getting to tonight is the environmental leadership goal number 2 was for us to create a water quality management plan. And that's something that we were able to finish kind of through the COVID time period and have brought forward after some review tonight. And some of the stuff up in front is kind of a current status of water quality and some of the initiatives that are going on. So I'll try to go through those very quickly. So Erica, if you want to go to the next one, we can skip this one. So we have our current status from 2021 up. I do apologize. We did receive our latest report from SMAST with the 2022 data. We got the rough draft of that report last Friday. So I haven't had a chance to digest it and get through all of it and update this table. But in general, our general trends are showing to improve in a lot of these areas, primarily Nantucket and Nantucket Harbor. I think our two biggest ponds of concern that we're still seeing are clearly Myacomet Pond is significantly impaired, and Hummock Pond are still the other most significantly impaired water body that we monitor on a regular basis. Next slide, please.
Do you want questions at the end or as we go through it?
Sure, I'll take questions whenever you guys have them. It's fine with me.
Yeah.
What always amazes me about all
Turned it off, turned it on. How we got to the TMD number. What is that standard? Could you explain to everyone in 1 minute?
Sure, I'll try my best to do the total maximum daily load question. So In all of these cases, with the exception of my comment on this list, the town enrolled in the Massachusetts Estuaries Program in the late 90s and early 2000s. And through working with our contractor SMAST and Mass DEP, we were able to set these thresholds through a combination of, field measurement, some modeling, and then kind of looking at it going forward using data updates and yearly kind of compliance updates to get to those threshold numbers. Just as an example, for Nantucket Harbor, we're right at that 0.35 milligrams per liter. For a bulk of the harbor, there's still areas that are not meeting that target, but those thresholds were set by the state. We revisited some of those areas as we look at it for, we relooked at Nantucket Harbor recently and the Long Pond Complex recently with together. Myacomet doesn't have one as it's not regulated. Myacomet's a freshwater pond. So when we're looking at these, we're also looking at that milligrams per liter. And I apologize for glossing over this, but it's focused on total nitrogen as the limiting nutrient in those estuary systems. So I'm happy to talk about it in much more detail for anyone that's interested, or answer further questions, but that's kind of the.
Since it's 8:30, I won't go on with it, but the point is it's somewhat arbitrary the way they're determined, and some of them are very old. So I appreciate your hard work. When we say it's improving, I'm not sure if it's really improving because it's an artificial number.
I will 100% agree. I think some of the things we'll talk about later are where we are departmentally pivoting kind of from the traditional model of measuring to the number and starting to use more of a habitat metric or actual evaluation of the physical environment to go in combination with the data that's collected to provide kind of a better picture of what the harbor health is doing, as getting the state to revisit those regulatory thresholds can be cumbersome at best.
Well, that would be absolutely terrific, because what you just mentioned is more to deal with real life in real time, not some arbitrary number.
Absolutely.
Because, again, it's 8:30, so I'll stop soon. But I mean, you talk about nitrogen, there's different types of nitrogen. You're not measuring different types of nitrogen. You're not measuring phosphorus. So these numbers to me are just kind of something to measure, and you tend to get what you measure. And sometimes what you're measuring is not what you should be measuring.
Correct. In our suite, obviously for TMDL here, it's focused on total nitrogen. So it's a collection of a number of different nitrogen species that go into that total. But we still do, even in these water bodies, even in the saltwater systems, we still measure phosphorus through other physical parameters like chlorophyll, chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, conductivity. We do measure for other nutrients as well. And then we also measure for things like fecal coliform and things like that through other testing programs as well. So, all right, we'll go to the next one, Eric. We'll try to. So obviously, when we talk about controllable load, these are the big three: wastewater, fertilizer, and overland flow. So that's all of our runoff and stormwater. I specifically picked that picture because he mentioned the sticker. So it's in there. So, all right, we can keep going. I won't bore you with everything in this slide, but this is kind of a little bit of the suite of testing that we do and metrics that we look at. Like I said, I think the important ones to highlight here that we were just talking about, we've added in a yearly eelgrass monitoring and bay scallop census program that was kicked off through a gift from the Great Harbor Yacht Club Foundation, and we've kind of carried forward for the last 3 years. But I think that's kind of the start of us really looking at what we're seeing in reality to couple with the data that we're collecting and the testing that we're doing to ensure that I think we all agree that the number is the number, but the proof is in the harbor for what we're seeing coming back. So we'll jump to the next one, Erica. So if you're looking for more information, the town developed a really cool data viewer that you can check out. It's interactive. People need help, they can contact our department and we'll help them out with that. All right, next one, please. So just to kind of run through some wastewater activities for all three of these. David's not here tonight, but there's a lot of work going on with sewer. A lot of projects that are underway, a lot of projects that are completed or close to completion. But there's a lot of activity happening there. Next, please. This is a question we get a lot. This is the total gallons that we've pumped out through our pump out program through the Harbor Master's office. Obviously, they're not perfect numbers, but you can see in 2020, 2021, their facility through their pump out and fixed pump out station pumped 139,000 gallons off of boats. So there's a pretty significant number that gets pumped. They pump regularly, and that number doesn't include what comes out of the boat basin with their sewer hookups too. So there's significant effort that goes into that.
Jeff, what's the reason of that number jump? Do we have a second boat? Are there more boats? Or are we just pumping out what's usually existing there?
There was a little uptick in boating that year, obviously kind of coming out of COVID and moving around. We saw a little bump up. Again, I think there's also Sheila and her crew do a really tremendous job of getting the word out that that's a service that's available. And I think increased, their services, and people were more aware of it. So I think that jump up is a real credit to their ability to pick up that increase in traffic.
So there's more communications and effort versus we had 2 more boats or something like that.
Absolutely.
Pump out boats. Yeah.
All right.
And the dye tablets, it's good to see.
Yep,
They're
dye
tracking
tablets
it.
have been
That was
added.
something that has been a push for a number of years. It's good to see that they're tracking it. You can't manage it if you don't count, don't write it down. So that's great.
Yeah, we're really hopefully making strides in doing that and getting good data for all of those things.
But I used to ask that 10, 12 years ago every time. And it's good to see we're moving.
That's my Matt fee slide with all the pump outs. Because
You knew it.
So these are some of the activities for overland flow. Obviously, I won't run through all of them. A lot of these projects are known to you guys. And most recently, obviously, last week we were here talking about Alyssa's discharge regulations that we're hoping to get in place here sometime soon, because it's an important step for helping to regulate those flows. All right, next slide, Erica. So I'm going kind of quest. This is definitely not my area of expertise. I wish Mike or Roberto were here. But if anyone participated in the PFAS workshop yesterday, obviously there's a lot of effort that's going into not only PFAS testing, but some remediation and obviously increasing town water supply to areas that have been impacted by PFAS. But this is definitely a program that's heavily under development, and health has added a specific individual, Mike, to kind of guide us through PFAS and hopefully bring some good things forward to you guys. But we wanted to at least highlight it in our update. Next one, please. These are a lot of the other things that are underway. I definitely recommend checking out our website to go through all of these. Again, for sake of time, I won't run through all of them, but they're all important programs as it looks at, these communities as a whole, whether it's invasive species management or managing harmful algal blooms in the ponds or the harbor, and getting people information where it's safe to swim and not, or interact with their pets, down to how we're looking at sediment moving around the harbor and dredging taking place, related to kind of informed views of those areas, is something that's underway. So
Suggestion in the future coastal resiliency plan implementation. They're tracking
Sure.
about 40 items. And I think it would be important for the public and for the board to know, sort of know that the plan's done, but now the hard work is, implementation. So
absolutely.
sometimes we see that and we go, oh, good, we don't have to worry about that. And 10 years later, we look and go, oh, we didn't do any of the things we said we were going to do. So I think what the coastal resiliency is trying to do is track it and do it.
Sure. We'll
Yeah,
definitely make
thank
that
you.
change. Next one, Erica. So what all of this leads to, this is kind of our data collection and management that was ongoing. Obviously, through your strategic plan, you guys have identified this goal to create this water resource management plan. Before Thais left us, she finished her final draft. We've had it reviewed through, the land council's had it to take a look. We've had it to the Conservation Foundation and a few other agencies. And I think it sets a really good framework for us, for how we're moving forward through some fairly broad goals that we can kind of refine and get into in finer detail as we develop programs for certain impacts or certain neighborhoods, to do that. So if we could go to the next one, that was kind of the cover. So obviously one of the things that we're really looking at here is, data-driven management options to bring forward to both the select board or, Board of Health or the Conservation Commission, to those ends. In this fiscal year 24, we proposed a pretty robust, data collection program. I know it seems like a lot, but I think it gets to Malcolm's point a little bit, where we have to stop just looking at the numbers and start looking at impact specific things like groundwater monitoring and stormwater monitoring, but also guaranteeing that we can go out and make sure that we know how the eelgrass population is changing or not. We can see what's happening with our shellfish populations and know that in real time and make decisions based upon what we're seeing in reality and how we're seeing the environment respond to some of the choices we're making over time. So that kind of gets to where we're getting on the last line. I'm kind of coming out of a cold, so I'm a little hoarse, but and I know the graphic is hard to see with the objectives and recommendations on the screen, but we really have some focuses that are there. And you can just leave it on the 4 bullet points, Erica, it's fine. The goals of the plans are really focusing on connecting people to the harbor and getting that story to people to understand why we're putting forward the management ideas that are coming through public collaboration and making those decisions not based on things like, well, this is how we've always done it, or this is what we think is, this is what the data is telling us to do. And this is what we're seeing. And this is the impact that we believe we can have. And we can measure it, and we can measure it after we've implemented management and evaluate it as we go forward. And then obviously a real emphasis on collaboration. There's a lot of really great like-minded entities on island for water quality protection. Obviously groups like the Land Council and the Conservation Foundation and the Land Bank have been a great partner in those that, you know, bringing those people together and kind of hive minding these things is good. But really at the end of it, the goal for all of these is not just clean water, but restoring our native habitats is kind of the big take home point. And that's why we're measuring. You know, we were talking about it just the other day in the office, and everyone tells the stories of, you know, I went out and went scalloping and was able to get my bushel in 20 minutes and the push raking was great and all of these things. And those stories aren't what you get anymore. And, you know, whether we're ever back to that point someday is unknown, but taking steps to try to get that resource back to where people can enjoy it and use it responsibly, I think is where we're really trying to head with the water quality management plan. Again, I'm happy to answer questions or take questions in regards to it. But what we're hoping to is to obviously get that to you guys for review. And if you have comments or questions, get those answered. But then at some point, get the okay to proceed and roll out and get to work.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions, comments? Malcolm?
Comment and a question. I think you're doing a great job, and it's a lot of work there. But I think the next presentation, you should put up how many FTEs you need and how much money all of this is going to cost. Because I still wonder, like, how many FTEs are presently working on it, all the regulations, the implementation, the education. It's probably spread across several departments, but it'd be nice to have a nice what you need, what you have, and what you need to request.
That is coming. I will tell you, we've added a lot in natural resources in the last couple of years through, you know, sustainability and resiliency and water quality. Our department, we're really happy that we've always operated with some level of departmental strategic plan. We've been in the process of updating that, and we'll have that back in front of you, and that will answer a lot of those questions for staffing levels here in the upcoming weeks. As for funding, obviously some of it's based on projects and project base. We can definitely fill some of those out if you're interested in seeing a bit more for what Scoped had put together. Again, the intent of tonight was just to give a quick update and do my best. Obviously, I'm filling in for our water quality specialist who would normally be doing this, but we're in the process of hiring a new one. So we're just trying to get this out, but also keep you guys in the know and the public in the know for what's happening and starting to move forward.
Thank you, Jeff.
Great,
Matt?
thanks.
Yep.
I'm good.
Brooke, you good? Don? Okay. Thank you. Moving on to select board reports and comments. We have the Board of Health appointment. I think we talked about it last week, but we need to make it official.
I move to appoint Malcolm to the Board of Health.
I'll second that. All those in favor? Brooke?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Don?
Dawn's not on.
Okay.
She must have left during the fire drill.
Jason, aye. So that passes 4-0. Any committee reports or Final comments? Nothing after 8:30? Nope. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call? Actually, we're all here.
Yeah.
So,
Aye.
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 That passes 4-0. Thank you all.
Yeah.
So we should start our meeting. We should end by now.